Welcome to a particularly jet-lagged version of the Balls Talk Sports NFL podcast. I got off the plane about an hour ago, but that's not going to stop me from talking football. As far as I can remember, I'm Elson Gratz, joined by my co-host Vince Ratlock. And Vince, it's the divisional round, right?
Yeah, it is the divisional round.
Is that next week?
Divisional round's next week. The NFL draft is this week.
All right. I haven't watched anyone yet.
Well, you know what? Well, too bad, kid. You're going up.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Are you ready to get kinky?
I am ready to get kinky.
That's the cure for jet lag, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Nothing better.
To start things off, we've got a clash between a team that's been in playoff mode for the last 2 months and a team that definitely didn't expect to make it this far. The Texans are headed to Arrowhead as 8.5-point underdogs. Hey, they beat the Chargers. Are the Texans contenders now?
No, right. They're not contenders, but last week really did increase my opinion of them, and it made me think they have a chance in this game. If they played Kansas City week 1, or in the wild card round, I probably would have picked Kansas City by like 20. But they showed some fight last week at least. You know, the offense, was it great? No, but it had its moments, and the defense was locked down. So there's a lot to be happy about if you're Houston. For the season overall, you made it to the divisional again. Stroud had a great performance last week, but your season's not over yet. You have to go through Kansas City. It's going to be a tough game. I think this is a winnable game, and I don't think this is one Kansas City dominates.
I still don't really feel like I know what to make of the Texans because we played this game all season long. We know the high-end talent that the Texans have, but it always felt like something was missing, and I think a huge part of that was their offensive line, which has been a problem.
Oh, yeah.
C.J. Stroud was running for his life by mid-season, and I think that certainly lowers the ceiling of an offense when you're not getting consistent line play, even with C.J. Stroud playing very, very well. However, then it clearly got to C.J. Stroud a little bit, and his decision-making, his overall process got continually worse. It culminated in a bad snap against the Chargers, and then C.J. Stroud got some of his mojo back, became an entirely different player, and this is a dumb comp. I know it is. But remember the Georgia game version of C.J. Stroud where his pocket presence just felt an entirely different animal than we've seen throughout his college career? It's not the same, but it has a little bit of a similar beat to it where if this is going to be the play-extending, off-script C.J. Stroud, avoiding mistakes that we've seen in the past, anything is on the table in this game. That being said, I just have a ton of faith. I have a ton of faith in the Chiefs' defense. They're not going to make things easy on the Texans' offense, and we just have too much bad tape on Houston for me to have any actual confidence heading into this game.
Yeah, for sure, and that's fair, but you know what? As you said, that play really, it sparked something in him, and you know what? At least it feels like Stroud kind of looks like the guy we saw in the first year, you know, somebody who's confident. That was his biggest thing. He got his confidence back after that play. Now, a quarter against Spags and good pass rushers like Chris Jones and Karlaftis could easily take it away, but man, I think this is going to come down to, of course, if Stroud can play like the guy we saw last week. But, you know, if these guys can block, specifically if they can block Chris Jones. They've got Shaq Mason back from injury. That'll be big. But, you know what? If they can pass well, it's also going to be Collins, right? He played really well last week. He's been playing very consistently. They need a big game for him. They need a lot of big things to happen, and they need the run game to go well this week, which it went well last week against the Chargers team that has been defending the run really well over the season. They had over 3 yards before contact per attempt, and they were facing stack box almost half of their rushes. So they were running against a lot of players, and their offensive line was winning. And Joe Mixon was winning. Now, Joe Mixon is questionable coming into the game. You got to think that he's going to fight it out. You know, it's Kansas City. He's an old Cincinnati guy. He's got a hatred for the Chiefs, right? But it's the division round. You think Mixon will fight it out. If they can get the run game going, if Stroud's confident, this offense can definitely do something. We got to remember, these teams met in Week 16, and the Texans probably at their lowest point because they went on the next week to get just ripped a new one by Buffalo, 31-2. That was a one-possession game. It's 27-19. Texans had the ball in the Chiefs' red zone with like 5 minutes to go, and then they didn't convert on fourth down. Chiefs took it the other way and ended the game. Could have been a tie game with less than 3 minutes to go in that game. So, and in that game, we'll get to this on the other side of the part, but there was a couple of defensive things that were going against them. So I'm going to pick Kansas City before we get to, I'm just going to say that outright. I'm going to pick them 23-17. I think that Houston won't get like shut out or anything. I think they're going to have a tough time because Spags and this defense, there is a lot of talent on this defense, even if it's not the most talented defense in the world. There's a lot of talent. But ultimately, just a lot of things have to go right for Houston to win this game. And you have to compete in the trenches, and that's just not something I'm confident Houston's going to do on the offensive side of the ball, so I can't side with them. But I will say, I think Houston covers the spread, and maybe. I don't think it's the worst bet in the world to pick Houston to cover the spread, but it's all going to come down to if they can stop playoff Patrick Mahomes.
In a lot of ways, and I just kind of drew this comparison up not long ago when I was kind of doing a retrospective on the teams in the playoffs. The Chiefs really remind me of a souped-up version of the Chargers. I think they play sort of a similar style of offense where they're not winning with the explosive plays. It's about line play. It's about effort. It's about running up the middle. And then on defense, these are both aggressive defenses that know how to blitz, that know how to rally and tackle. Great defensive lines. However, I think that Kansas City has one thing that the Chargers don't in particular, and that is an alpha number one cornerback in Trent McDuffie. I think we talked about Nico Collins and how that needed to be a Nico Collins game if they were going to beat the Chargers, and that's in a lot of ways what we saw. If you can slap McDuffie on Collins and obviously not erase him, but force the Texans to go to their secondary pass catchers, we've seen how much harder that makes life on C.J. Stroud. One way that the Chiefs have been beatable this year is attacking them through the slot, hitting that intermediate part of the field. If you're throwing to Xavier Hutchinson as your first read on a lot of these plays, that's a recipe for turnovers, and that's a recipe for 3-and-outs. I think the Chiefs know how to capitalize on that.
For sure. That's the thing. Nico's going to have to show up, and it's not going to be an easy time for him. I do think McDuffie's been... In the slot last year, he was unbeatable. He's been at least beatable this year. He hasn't been a world beater. He hasn't been an iron wall. In the outside, he has shown slight weaknesses there. Collins will be able to pick up on that. I think Collins will get his. You know what I mean? So it will be important for Nico to go out there and win. And another thing is, if they can get Stroud out of the pocket, like, again, bring back to the Georgia game where everybody talks about with Stroud, that's what showed them his potential. He can get out of the pocket, make things work on the run, improvise, and then beat you with his legs. That's another thing that Kansas City's been kind of susceptible to this year. Quarterbacks in the scramble drill, they make them choose, and sometimes their players will choose wrong because a lot of these linebackers are younger guys who have kind of gotten some manufactured production from Spags and all that. Their job is kind of easier than most NFL linebackers. So when you put them in a position where you've got to choose and make the right decision when there really is no right decision, I think Stroud is going to want to take advantage of that. And if they can get that going, which I know you shouldn't game plan to be on the run, but if that can get going, and we know how good Stroud and Collins are in the scramble drill, then get a couple of big plays on third down, keep drives going, that'll be key. I think you just got to hang in there. But against Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be tough to hang in there. This is the playoffs. This is where the Chiefs thrive on both offense and defense. The coaches come alive. The players come alive. So you've got to withstand that early onslaught that they will bring at you. And then if you somehow survive that, maybe you're even up. Well, Houston knows what it's like to be up against Kansas City in a divisional game, don't they? We all remember 24-0. I'm guessing Houston fans haven't forgotten that soon. So you can never feel safe against Kansas City. If they just have to keep it close all game and play mistake-free football, if they do that, they've got a chance. It's just hard for me to see that happening.
You touch on that connection between C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins in scramble drill. I think that this game is going to be a fascinating sort of blend of styles because my first instinct was the deciding factor is going to be who can stay in structure. These are two teams that at their best want to sustain drives, want to slowly march their way down the field, and the Texans, because of their line, have struggled to do that, whereas Kansas City has been a lot more successful. However, these are also two teams that at their best have quarterbacks that can escape the pocket and hit the chemistry throws. Why I like the Chiefs is because I have a little bit more faith in both phases. I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to establish a solid run game going at Houston's interior defensive line. We talk about that a lot. However, it's worth noting they haven't been terrible despite their mediocre interior line. Like, it hasn't been a gaping liability like the early season Cowboys. And the Chiefs, for as often as they've been able to move the chains on the ground, it's still an overall inefficient run game. So we can talk all about the schematics, but I do think a lot's going to be put on Patrick Mahomes, and I trust Patrick Mahomes to get that done, but you are still banking on a quarterback having that type of performance. I have the Chiefs 24-17. I think we see this game very similarly.
Yeah. But again, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, a big part of how this Chiefs team has always they've just won, and they've won in the most crazy ways on offense. They always convert on third down. Big part of that is not Patrick Mahomes only, it's Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and that's actually my swing factor in this game. Will playoff Travis Kelce show up? Will Travis Kelce show up? We've been talking about this whole season. Kelce's production has come down. He hasn't looked his best this year. Is he maybe saving it for the playoffs because he knows he's an older guy? He doesn't have as much energy, so I'm not going to waste it on the regular season. I know we're going to be there. Let me save it. Let me do the LeBron thing where I'm going to save my health and then just go insane in the playoffs, because if he does, Kansas City's going to be dangerous, and I don't understand. I don't see a way for the Texans to stop Travis Kelce at the top of his game. I just don't think this defense is built to do it. Alshire is questionable. He's the only linebacker in coverage I think could even stand a chance. He's the only guy that has the athleticism to keep up with Kelce. Tuoto certainly doesn't. But if Kelce isn't like that, who do you throw to? I'm not going to trust Xavier Worthy in a divisional game. Rashee Rice is out. And that brings us to my matchup to watch for the game, which is Hollywood Brown versus Miles Bryant. Hollywood Brown, has he played a game with them yet? Did he
Hollywood?
Play? Hollywood?
I think he's been in 2 to 3. He's been back for a little while. He's been sort of a role player for them. They've been rotating him in.
Yeah. Well, see, that's how they won in the last game. When the Texans played the Chiefs last time, how the Chiefs won on offense was they attacked the slot. And that's where Jeff Okudah was playing. And Jeff Okudah led up 7 catches for 109 yards. And that was about as many yards as the rest of the team allowed. Okudah just got burned play after play. So if Hollywood can do that again from the slot, that's what they're going to attack because they think it's a weak point. But now Texans are starting Miles Bryant in the slot. He's looked better. He had a really good game against the Chargers last week. You saw Ladd had all of that production. Almost none of it was against Miles Bryant. Only 1 catch was he on the nearest defender in Ladd McConkey. That was the 86-yard touchdown catch. But there was like 3 guys there that all could have made the tackle. I don't think that's just going to be on him. So Miles Bryant, if he can lock down Hollywood, we know how good those outside corners are. Stingley and Lassiter. I don't think anybody's going to get open consistently. If he can lock down Hollywood, Kelce, and if Kelce isn't at the top of this game, that's where I think Houston has a chance, because this defense is playing better than I think they have all season. Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter were hunting last week. They were going insane against Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Joe Tooney is a very good player, and I think he'll do his thing, but man, whoever's on Jawan Taylor is going to be a mismatch. So if Mahomes is under pressure and he doesn't have any guys to throw to, it's going to be a long day for Kansas City, especially if they can't get the run game going in an efficient manner. That's why I think this game is going to be close, not because Houston's going to have a world-beating day offensively, but because I think their defense is going to show up. I think they're going to limit Kansas City. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to be one where Kansas City's up most of the day and then Houston kind of makes it look like a one-score game in the end. It's like it was close, but it wasn't really close. I think this is going to come down to the last wire. I think maybe Mahomes gets a game-winning drive, or the Strouds fail to get, I think it's 4th and 9 and they just don't get it. Chiefs get it, then kneel it out or something like that. I think it's going to come down to the last play. But I think this is a winnable game for Houston. They just need a lot to go right for that to happen. I would love to see it happen. I don't think it will. I'm picking Kansas City, but this will tell us a lot about this Kansas City team and if they have the ability to three-peat in a league that is the most top-heavy we've seen in a long time.
Deeper into the playoffs, I am definitely concerned about Kansas City's lack of high-quality wideouts. And like you mentioned, Xavier Worthy is going to get absolutely bench-pressed in this game.
Yeah.
However, I do have a lot of faith in Travis Kelce that he's going to be able to turn it on for the playoffs, because even though a lot of his numbers have been down, in particular, like his missed tackles forced, I don't have this stat on me, but it's dropped from like a career low of 12 to 2 or 3 in the regular season. It's been absolutely stark. However, against man coverage on the regular season, and this is factoring in that game that he didn't even play, second most yardage behind only Brock Bowers.
Jeez.
He is still that guy who can separate one-on-one, and I think that's really going to be brought to the forefront. And then kind of a final note on this game. I talked about how it's an interesting blend of styles where these are quarterbacks that can both play in structure, and that could be a big factor. However, they can also escape the pocket, and so you're going to have scramble drill factoring in. This is an inherently enigmatic game, I think, because we both agree it's going to be low scoring. It could be decided by a handful of key turnovers and plays, and that's a high variance game script.
Oh, yeah.
That leans underdog. However, in one-score games, Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and the devil magic only gets stronger in the playoffs.
You would think so.
Yeah, so maybe that doesn't work to the underdog, and it's also in Arrowhead, something we can't understate how hard it is to play there. And for Stroud, who's been kind of dealing with those confidence issues, he misses a couple of plays. Kansas City is at a decibel level of like a jet engine. That's going to be tough to That's going to be really tough to play in.
It's kind of funny. It was like after that bad snap and he picked it up on the sidelines, threw cross body, hit his man wide open. It was like the squiggly routes disappeared for him. He started seeing it normal again. I think crowd in general is a little bit of an overstated variable. People just think, oh, home field advantage, that's 3 points. It varies wildly depending on where you're playing. Arrowhead in the playoffs, yeah.
You don't want to play that.
That one's a factor.
Yeah, and especially like the fact that you had squiggly lines at home in the first place is a little concerning. So going into Arrowhead, you better not start the game with squiggly lines or else you are going to be down 14-0 by the time the half closes.
The routes are just question marks.
It's just...
it's Nico Collins, and like it's just arrows pointing to Nico. Nobody else even has a route.
It's just like, throw to Nico.
Two of the most likable teams in the NFL enter. Only one gets to leave. It's the Commanders headed to Detroit where they are 9-point underdogs. I love Washington. They obviously got a big win against Tampa Bay in the wild card round. However, I don't know if their defense is going to get a stop against Detroit. I think that the Commanders are going to be able to move the football, but it's just tough. Even with the Jaden Daniels magic that we've seen at times this season, obviously you're rooting for the underdog, but you're rooting for Detroit too. It's hard for me to see the path for the Commanders other than you beat them in a miracle shootout.
That's fair. I do see the path for the Commanders, though. I love that is my favorite spread of the week. Is Washington -8.5? You said it was
9.
9. Yeah, my favorite spread of the week. I think this game's going to be close because yes, Washington's defense has been average on the season. Detroit's offense, we've seen their ceiling earlier on the season. But now with some injuries, but they don't have as many injuries on offense. But recently it's felt like they can't score more than 30 for some reason. Like, that's still a high number, 30, 35. They can't really get higher than that. And obviously that's enough to win sometimes. But on the flip side, I don't see an answer to Washington for Detroit. That's where my biggest concern with this game. That's why I think Washington has a path to victory. I don't see an answer for Detroit because when you're talking about how they've won as of late, let's just blitz the hell out of them, okay? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You're playing Jaden Daniels. He's been a top 5 quarterback against the blitz this year, and he is a freak on the run and in the scramble drill where the Lions have been actually awful this year. Because what happens in the scramble drill is that Lions defense, their lack of talent, their lack of all those injuries start to show up in the scramble drill because the scheme, the coaching is going to be less present. Now you're relying on your guys, that talent, to make split-second instinctual decisions. And I'm going to give Washington the favor in that, a team that's elite at doing the scramble drill versus a team that's awful at defending the scramble drill. I think the Commanders can kind of live in that. And then if you don't blitz, Zadarius Smith, Levi, and Rozarki, you're expecting them to consistently get pressure against a team that has allowed a bottom 10 pressure rate this year, and Daniels, who is incredibly hard to sack, and a secondary that's incredibly beat up with Terry McLaurin on the outside and Jaden Daniels being able to dice you up. I don't think Detroit's going to be able to stop Washington with any consistent basis. So yeah, Detroit may get theirs offensively. I think Washington's going to get theirs offensively. So I do think it is going to be a miracle shootout, actually.
I think that maybe saying I don't see a path or whatever I said earlier, that wasn't fair because I want to emphasize 42-35 Commanders is very possible.
Oh, yeah.
That I don't think that would be shocking. However, you talked about the Lions feeling like they maybe have a bit of a ceiling offensively. I straight up disagree with that. If we go to, what would be their last 5 games, 31 against the Vikings in a game where I don't want to say they led up, but you certainly change the way you play offensively in the playoffs to just make sure that the clock keeps running, that you don't let your opponent back in. 40 against the 49ers in a game that was just a straight-up shootout. They were trailing at one point in that game. They had to dig their way out. 34 against the Bears. 42 in that Bills game that they lost. I fully believe that this is a team that can compete in a shootout. Now, against some of the really, really high-end defenses in the NFL that can maybe bracket Amon-Ra St. Brown, that can play him tough in the box and force him to lean on the Tim Patricks of the world, then I could see a little bit of an offensive ceiling. I don't think that the Commanders have the defensive talent. I think that Detroit is going to get everything they want on the ground. The Lions thrive in the play-action passing game, and I don't see the Commanders' answer to Amon-Ra in the slot. When I said that I don't think that the Commanders will get a stop, or they may not get a stop, I kind of actually believe that. I think that there is absolutely a world where the Lions score every real drive that they get, and then the Commanders are going to be forced to keep pace. And like you said, Detroit is kind of outgunned on the defensive side of the ball. However, the Commanders are not one of these uber-consistent offenses that consistently rolls down the field. It is deep balls to Terry McLaurin. It is leaning on an offensive line that, well, they've played up, which has been a big part of the Commanders' success. You know, that pressure rate, I think some of that is how fast they like to get the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands. I think the sack rate is a lot of Jaden Daniels' sack mitigation and the magic he could make happen out of structure. I just think that the Commanders are going to be swimming uphill all night. They're absolutely going to get theirs. I think that they put multiple touchdowns up on the board. But it's hard for me to see them, not impossible, but difficult for me to see them keeping pace with Detroit. We've seen Detroit in this game script before, and it usually leans in their favor.
That's fair, and I think when I said Detroit can't score more than 30, I was a little... I don't think that they can... I don't think that they can pull away from a team in a shootout, is what I'm trying... Like, there's something about this team, and Jared Goff specifically... when they're playing a competent defense, which the Commanders may not be the best defense in the world, I think they're a competent defense because of, first of all, because of leadership. Dan Quinn's done a great job, but the Bobby Wagner effect is absolutely real. We saw it last week. That was massive. And a big part of that win last week was they held Tampa to 100 rushing yards. Tampa had averaged 220 in the year, and they were only averaging like 4 yards a carry, and Washington had a negative 0.4 EPA per rush. It was a great run defense game from Washington, and they need to bring that against Detroit. Because if you let them run all over you, this game's going to be not close. I don't think that they stand a chance if you let Detroit run over you. But if Bobby Wagner has a career game, we just need you to hold out just a little bit longer, Bobby. Keep the Reaper at bay just a little bit longer. You can be a Hall of Famer when the Super Bowl ends. We're not worried about that right now. Just stay a little longer. If John Allen and Daron Payne can hold up, if this defense can find the run plays, Frankie Louval had a great game. Jeremy Chin was really good coming down into the box. If you can recreate what you did against Tampa Bay, almost an equally good running team, then you're forcing Jared Goff to pass more. Jared Goff can absolutely pass, and he can put up great games. He can put up some stinkers. We've seen it. And that's what, you know what? Just, you force Jared Goff to pass, and then you see what happens. Let Jared Goff throw the football, and if he beats you, okay, that's fine. It was a great season. Nobody expected us to make it this far anyway. If he doesn't, well, we're in a shootout where we have the better quarterback by a mile. Because Jaden Daniels is the better quarterback than Jared Goff, even if Goff's playing at the best.
I think I agree. Maybe not if Goff is at his best, because when Goff is at his best, he's pretty automatic.
I'd take Daniels over Goff. At both of their bests, I'd take Daniels.
At both of their bests, I would agree on Daniels.
And Daniels is playing at his best right now. So, I'm talking all this about Washington. I did pick Detroit 27-24. It pained me. I picked Detroit, but I just think Washington brings it, and there's something about this team right now. They're playing hard. They're playing like the Lions did a couple of years ago. A team that's playing with house money. We're going to hit you. We're going to make it incredibly difficult on you. I just don't think that this team is going to let themselves get blown out. I think they're going to keep it close. And in a close game, I think anything can happen with Jaden Daniels at the helm.
I love that you shout out Bobby Wagner because there are a lot of veterans naturally in the NFL that at this stage of their career are more so just names. Not the case with Wagner. He still absolutely has the 99 tackle rating. The dude, nobody gets by him, and that's huge when you're playing a team like Detroit that is so explosive at the second level. However, you got to mention David Montgomery's back. Is he at 100%? We'll see. However, I think having that extra body in the backfield when even as the lead back, Gibbs has been really efficient. I think that that's huge. Like you mentioned, if Detroit can get downhill, that could certainly be curtains here. But if not, and it does become a quarterback duel, I certainly see that path to victory. I do just have more faith in Detroit because, like I mentioned, I think there are more ways that things could go wrong for the Commanders, especially, you talked about the lack of depth that Detroit has in the defensive backfield. I think that this is a pretty solid matchup for that because if you can do something schematically to contain Terry McLaurin, and we know that the Lions like to run a lot of man coverage, I think this is one of the matchups where, they might be able to hang with Olamide Zaccheaus. They might be able to hang with Christian McCaffrey's brother.
Luke McCaffrey?
Luke McCaffrey's brother.
You're forgetting about somebody.
Am I forgetting about
You're
somebody?
forgetting about De'Ami Brown. 100-yard game last week.
Oh, sure.
Put it on the banner. Hang the banner. De'Ami Brown on a 100-yard game. My draft take is finally coming around.
It's about time. Everybody likes De'Ami Brown.
Everybody loved De'Ami Brown coming to the draft. Finally, we get some. Keep it up, man. Your matchup.
You could get rolling.
Yeah, maybe.
It's about time.
Maybe.
My final score prediction is Detroit 35-24. This one could definitely be closer than that. This is going to be an undeniably fun game to watch regardless of who wins because I just don't see a way that it's not a shootout.
Yeah, and you know what? Whoever wins, I think most people are going to be happy about it unless you're in the NFC unless you're an NFC East fan or NFC North fan. You're gonna be happy watching both these teams in the NFC Championship. Hell, you might root for them, unless you're a Philly fan and you meet them in the NFC Championship. But you know what? Last thing to say about this game, I think it's really an interesting defensive matchup. Both of these defenses, because you look at Detroit, number 1 in base personnel usage in the league by like 80 plays. They run like 460 plays. The next closest was like 380. They run by far the most base, which actually could hurt them with, how much Washington loves to run the trips, isolate Terry McLaurin. If you're running base against that all game, they're going to kill you. And if you force them to play more nickel, they might be a little bit more uncomfortable. But then you look at Washington, they run the second least base personnel out of any team in the league. They just love to play in the nickel. They live there. So that's another thing. You run the ball, you force them to play more base personnel, you're going to make them a little bit more uncomfortable. And then you also got, this is another matchup to watch. I forgot to put, the Washington offense is the number 2 red zone offense in the league.
Really?
Number 2 at both converting touchdowns and overall EPA per play. You want to know who's the number 1 red zone defense?
Let me guess.
It's Detroit.
Yeah.
It's Detroit. And maybe all of that came from the Week 18 game against Sam Darnold, who went like 1 for 9 and gave up and left 4 touchdowns on the board in a single drive. But maybe all of it came from that. But it's there. Detroit is a great red zone defense. If Washington can punctuate that, maybe that's a path to victory. If Detroit can stand tall, bend, don't break, how is Washington going to consistently score? A lot of fascinating matchups that could decide the game, but you know what? In the playoffs, sometimes it doesn't come down to the matchups. Sometimes it comes down to who wants it more, and both of these teams want it a lot.
I don't think anybody in the NFL can want it more than Detroit, though, right? Right?
That's fair, but when you got a team like Washington, like I said, the leadership and a team that knows that they have nothing to lose, that makes you want it even more. When you have nothing to lose, that makes that I don't know, that sometimes sparks something in teams, and it seemed like it did that last week for Washington. It's going to be a fun effort matchup. I think both these guys are going to put in 110, 115%.
If I had to summarize, I would say that I like the Lions better because I think that they win the trench battle on both sides of the ball. However, for football fans, I don't really think that there's going to be a loser here. It's going to be a ton of fun either way.
Oh, this'll be a fun game.
Holy shit, Victor, an NFC West team won a playoff game.
Oh my goodness.
Rams are headed to Philly. The Eagles are 6-point favorites. And I still don't know what to make of Los Angeles.
Does it count if it was against the Vikings?
I still don't know what to make of the Vikings, man.
We'll get to the Vikings in a little bit because we're going to do a moratorium on all the wild card losers. But yeah, they're weird.
I'm so happy
that game was so weird.
We talked about like having no idea what was going to happen in our wild card show for that game because like Tampa Bay, Washington these are two high variance offenses. We don't know what version we're going to see. I just didn't know what we were going to get in that Rams-Vikings game. I felt like anything from a Vikings blowout to a Rams blowout like we saw was on the table. However, I don't think that it's just smoke and mirrors for the Rams. No. I think that they are putting their truly best foot forward in the playoffs, and I do think that starts with Sean McVay and the way that he's able to unlock this offense. And there's something unique about the Rams where they have playmakers like Cooper Kupp, but especially Puka has been absolutely fantastic. But this isn't an offense that traditionally runs up the score. I think that McVay knows how to vary his calling based on the game situation. We remember that game against the Bills where it was just an absolute shootout. However, he also knows when to apply the brakes and turn this into a more first down by first down, march down the field, don't give Matthew Stafford the opportunity to turn it over type of offense. And I think that that's maybe the script that we get against the Eagles. I think that they're going to be able to pull that off in large part because the offensive line is continually playing better. Los Angeles needs to hold up in the trenches on both sides of the ball here to hang.
Absolutely. And it seemed that a week ago, that seemed impossible. How is this Los Angeles team going to hold up against Philly in the trenches, especially this defense? How are they going to beat this offensive line? Well, now that offensive line doesn't look so unbeatable. 11 pressures on 23 dropbacks last week. I mean, damn near 50% pressure rate. That just doesn't happen with the Eagles' offensive line, and part of it's Jalen Hurts. We'll get to the Jalen Hurts experience in a couple minutes, but I think it's an absolute must that you win the trench battle. I think it'll be tougher with the offensive line. I think where Los Angeles wins this game, if they do, it's got to be defensively.
I agree with that. You talked about the Jalen Hurts conversation. I don't think Jalen Hurts is bad. I think he is definitively the weakest thing that Philadelphia does offensively because you look at what's put in place around him. He has an offensive line that's fantastic in both phases, like sets up an elite run game with Saquon Barkley, but also keeps him well protected both from the tackle spot and the interior. Excellent pass catchers from A.J. Brown, who can win any 50-50 ball in the world. Devontae Smith is an exceptional separator. And Dallas Goedert has been super efficient. So why is this Philly team not lighting up the scoreboard every week? And I think it goes back to the quarterback. You watch Jalen Hurts play, and it always feels like whether it's due to accuracy or pocket presence, decision-making, he's leaving a little bit on the bones of each play.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's definitely just... He just leaves you wanting more every single time, whether it's just a bad decision or it's the right decision, but it's an overthrown ball, or he just forgets about a rusher and just gets hit, and it shows in the stat sheets. Whenever he has a clean pocket, when he's under no pressure, he's by far the worst quarterback in the league statistically in pretty much every category, including EPA per play. He is the only negative EPA per play when under no pressure in the league, and it's not particularly close.
He's negative in EPA
negative.
Without
It's not
pressure.
even like negative 0.01. It's negative 0.15, I want to say. And the next closest is 0.11. Like,
he has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
You just throw it up to them when you have no pressure. Like, you alert. If A.J. Brown is the alert guy and you aren't pressured, and it's a one-on-one, just throw it to him, man. But he's just, every time it's clean, good situation, he leaves something on the table. Now, weirdly enough, he's actually third under pressure in EPA per play. Whatever, that's interesting.
I wonder if some of that's because of what he does in scramble drill.
Yeah.
And not as scramble drill play extension and throwing, but what he does as a scrambler because, quarterback scrambles tend to be very efficient on a play-by-play basis. That would maybe be my only guess.
And EPA per play is also not the best stat in the world. It could also just be because, you know what, I'm under pressure. I have to throw it to A.J. Brown, and A.J. Brown makes the catch or something like that. So or also you've got Saquon Barkley as your check down option. He will make
helps.
a couple guys miss, and then that goes to that. But Hurts, man, he also did not look good last week.
No, not at all.
He's not putting his best foot forward in the playoffs. You know what I mean? He had a really great run in 2022. We haven't seen that guy since then. And against the Rams defense, who put Minnesota and Sam Darnold in absolute hell last week. Shout out Chris Shula. That was a fantastic game from him. What he was pulling out was just diabolical. Pair that with also the fact that this game has been played this season. Week 12. Remember the game that Saquon ran for like 255? That was on Los Angeles. That was on the Rams. But it's different this time. I think it'll be different this time because that actually goes to help them when you play a team, especially a team like Philly, who kind of knows what they want to do and they run it and they haven't changed much since that game. Shula's going to find a way to beat that. He's going to find a way to exploit that. He's seen it. He's seen all the intricacies. He's seen his first idea not work. How are we going to beat him this time? Well, I think that the Rams are also another team, like we talked about this with Green Bay last week, how they're kind of a team built to beat this Philly offensive line, and then Green Bay went out there and they beat the Philly offensive line more than we've seen any team do this year. They've just got a lot of guys. They don't have a single guy that they rely on. Versus obviously very good. He's better than anybody in Green Bay's defensive line. But they've got 5 pass rushers with 10% pressure rates or higher. You know, you got Verse, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, and Michael Hecht. All of these guys can get to the QB. You know, and one of those 5 Philly offensive linemen is going to make a mistake on any given play. They're going to get pressure. They got 26 pressures on Darnold last week. I think Hurts is going to have a hard time. He's going to be under pressure. Maybe that'll benefit him. Maybe it won't. But he's going to have a tough time. I don't know if that secondary is going to be hold up, though.
To me, the swing factor in this game is how much are you just able to give the ball to Saquon Barkley and let him go to work? Because you mentioned that matchup where Saquon had a fantastic game. Part of me thinks that they can't do that again because of the Shula effect. And future head coach candidate? When is he in the coaching carousel?
Maybe this year. Maybe there's a team that
he's got the last name.
Fired their guy a little bit late. Cowboys. Maybe they fired their guy a little bit late and they just need a guy that hasn't gotten any interest. Hey, Chris Shula, we see what you're doing in the playoffs. You want to come in and interview?
I think that it's easier to adjust your defensive philosophy to attack a quarterback in a passing game than it is to stop a fantastic running back behind an elite offensive line, however. And maybe this is sort of a take. I don't think that Saquon is the most valuable running back in the NFL.
Interesting.
I think that title goes to Derrick Henry because of the way that he can absolutely deflate a defense. We saw that against Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
Pittsburgh never had a chance because of the amount of force that Derrick Henry was creating every play. They couldn't stop him 3 consecutive times. I don't know that you can do that with Barkley. Barkley does need to have room up front so he can hit the second level and generate explosives. If the Rams can cook something up where they can be forcing him to make reads in the backfield, knocking back Philly on the interior a little bit, and they know how to run stunts. They've done a very good job hiding Braden Fisk and some other smaller interior defensive linemen, comparably to what you'd expect. If they can draw something up and they can force this to be a Jalen Hurts beats our secondary game, honestly, I think I might lean Rams there because I don't have any faith in Jalen Hurts to do that. And we saw playoff Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford was inconsistent throughout the season, but he's settled in behind a better offensive line. Philly has a fantastic defense. I don't think that they have a true weak link. However, if Stafford can sit back there and pick them apart, I think that this one could lean Rams. That being said, I do have Philly 24-21. I do think it's going to be lower scoring. I do think it's going to come down to pressure and mistakes. Tell me more.
Well, last word on the offensive defensive matchup between Philly and Los Angeles. That running game that went so well last time, I do think that there is something you can adjust with that. And I think we saw it late in that game. So we're talking about base personnel usage. If you can tell, I finally figured out how to use the NFL Pro Engine to figure out personnel usages. But Los Angeles, they are second in base personnel usages in the league. Which, by the way, if you're uninitiated, base personnel just means you're running your 3-4 or your 4-3, whichever your coach and your personnel calls for. right? And in the Rams' case, it's the 3-4 most of the time. So they can vary it. They can, but generally they like the 3-4. You like Brown and Young and Hecht, or inverse, are the outside linebackers. But they run that the second most in the league. They did not run that as much against Philly that time that they played them. And when they did run it, overall they did a decent job of stopping Saquon. Most of his yards came when they ran against the nickel. I think Shula's going to call that base defense more, and you saw him adjust to it whenever he thought that Philly was going to run the ball. Late in that game, the fourth quarter, the game was mostly already decided, so that is a factor. But he called more, let's just run the 3-4 more. Let's see if that works, and it did. They audibled into the 3-4 sometimes, like a pseudo 3-4. I mean, if you're running the nickel, but they brought the nickel in as the linebacker, and they rotated one of the linebackers to the edge rushers, and they did that. So there is a way to stop Saquon and that offensive line and that running game. I think he figured it out in the last game. We'll see if it holds up in this game, because if it doesn't, if you get reamed like that again, it's going to be hard to win a playoff football game, giving up 200 yards on the ground. But if you figure it out, put the pressure on Hurts to make a play, that's your path to victory.
This one is definitely on trap game alert for me. And Philly is so good that I think this is a trap game for them in the playoffs because they have Los Angeles so out-talented on both sides of the ball. But I can visualize it. If you can not stuff the run every time on early downs, but if you can bottle it up and prevent some of those explosives, get Jalen Hurts into third and longs where he's making mistakes and missing throws, and then offensively, we've talked a lot about this Rams offensive line. I think that Rob Havenstein and Alaric Jackson are going to be able to hold their own against Philly's edge rush duo.
Last week.
And we know that the Rams offense with Sean McVay, they like to keep things tight and kind of condensed. And they like to bring guys in motion and run insert and that type of game plan. If you can replace the blitzes, because I think there's going to be a lot of blitzing on Philly's part to try and get Stafford uncomfortable where he has been mistake prone, and you can keep moving the chains and keep hitting them where they're not, I think that definitely benefits the Rams. This one's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and that's where I think Los Angeles has their strength right now, is they got hot at the right time, and sometimes teams get hot at the right time, and they go on crazy runs. Stafford looked like the best quarterback in football last week, and my biggest concern with him all season is he's been inconsistent under pressure. They consistently got to him, and he was very consistently beating them under pressure. Some of the most ridiculous throws you'll ever see. He was just nails. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, they were great too. Also, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, they kind of went off against the Eagles last time. Nacua had 120 yards. Kupp had 70 or 80, I believe. This offense has played Philly before. They had 20. They probably should have had more in that game. They're playing like the best version of themselves. I think Stafford's going to outplay Hurts by a lot. I think Nacua is going to have a big game. I think Cooper Kupp's going to show up big time. I think the offensive line's going to hold off. I think Shula's going to get himself a head coaching job next year with this game. And I'm picking the upset, baby. I'm picking Rams 24, Eagles 20. They can't say we go chalk every time. We finally picked an upset.
I love touching on Puka Nacua here because he missed some time. I think people don't necessarily realize he's an even more complete player now than he was his rookie year. Like, Puka has only gotten better and more efficient. I think that he could possibly be the top performer of this entire round of playoff games.
I mean, yeah, like you talk about it. Talk about receivers that are definitively better than Puka Nacua in the league. Justin Jefferson, fair to say. Jamar Chase, fair to say. A.J. Brown, I think that's fair to say. Is there anybody else?
Not that comes to mind.
I can't think of anybody else that is better than Puka.
No, not definitively.
You taking just a one-on-one who I'd rather have to start a franchise, I'd take Puka. I think he's number 4 receiver in the league. We will do receiver breakdowns over the summer, but I think that... And A.J. Brown's really good, but he had a single catch for 10 yards last week. What happened? Where'd you go, AJ? That was partly Jalen Hurts missing a couple times.
That's Keyshawn Nixon effect.
Oh, yes. You mean the Eagles won the game? That's the Keyshawn Nixon effect?
Correct.
Okay. But, yeah, Puka's insane. Cooper Kupp, show up, you know? And also, the underrated fact about this Rams team is they've got 2 good number 3 wide receivers in Tutu Atwell and Demarcus Robinson. Maybe they get a couple over on Cooper DeJean, make him uncomfortable, and I don't know, man. The motion is really good against the cover 6. A lot of the times you flood one side, get them confused. Some of the times that Fangio plays match, some of the guys just get a little confused, especially because this defense is full of a lot of young defensive backs. I think McVay is going to take advantage of that. I think Sean McVay is going to have a great game. I think Stafford's going to have a great game. I think they're going to shock the world. Not necessarily shock the world, but they're going to go to the NFC Championship game.
I think when I considered all the factors, I had to pick the Eagles, but the vibes.
The vibes
say
also,
Rams.
You know what? Your city is in flames. You're doing it for them. That's also a factor.
I think it is.
Like they came out with a fire inside of them, man. I don't mean that as
It's true.
Like they wanted to play for their city, and that can seriously affect a team sometimes and their resolution and how much they want to win. Because we can talk about scheme all we want, but it is an emotional sport. You know, it is a who wants it more, and there are very few teams in football who want it more than the Rams right now.
Hey, Nick Sirianni's always running hot on the sidelines.
Yeah, so and you know what? Let's not discount the fact that Nick Sirianni could easily lose this football game.
Very true.
Let's not forget that there's a wide coaching disparity that we can't overlook.
I'm actually glad that we got to that in a roundabout way and that he could truly just be outcoached.
Yeah.
Like, if you had to do a one-liner on this game, what was that?
He's not a coordinator. What they've done is fascinating. Let's get our head coach as little involved with the entire team as possible. Let's just let Kellen Moore and Fangio run the team.
I look at that and say, what does he really do for them? He's not like an elite locker room guy. He doesn't seem like.
All of those guys who aren't play callers, Harbaugh, Tomlin, both Campbell, they all come to mind, right? They're elite culture guys. Sirianni, I mean, he acts like a child in the media. Doesn't seem like anybody would really care if he got fired tomorrow. I don't know what he brings.
He defends his team from opposing fans.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll chuck a beer at a Los Angeles homeowner who just lost their house in a fire. Maybe he'll do that.
He's the archetypal Philadelphian. That's why he's still around.
That's true. Yeah, and you know what? Maybe he's just gonna Zach Taylor his way to a job for the next 5 years. Go to a Super Bowl once and never do anything else with elite rosters.
And that Super Bowl's not this year, right? Because they're losing to the Rams?
They're losing to the Rams.
Glad we cleared that up.
And by the way, this means Stafford versus Detroit rematch again in the NFC Championship. Awesome. That's what I'm predicting.
That would be so much fun. I hope we get that.
Especially with how much Kirby Joseph has been talking shit on Matthew Stafford in the media. He'd throw at him a lot. He's gonna zip one into a tight window.
We're gonna be seeing the sidearm.
Oh yeah, he's gonna, and then he's gonna get in his face, talk shit. He hasn't been talking shit. He will do it on the football field. Matthew Stafford will get in your face.
The Balls Talk Sports. We don't just predict this round. We predict the next one as well.
Yeah.
That's why you listen to us. And finally, the game you've all been waiting for: Ravens, Bills. Baltimore is favored by 1.5 on the road, which I think is interesting, but that doesn't matter to me. This one's a toss-up, and I hate to take the it's about QB play route, but it's about QB play, I think. It feels like, in terms of roster talent and what these teams do schematically, I would have to side with Baltimore. However, then you're betting against Josh Allen. Then on the other end, if Lamar wins this, I feel like for the first time since Lamar's been in the league, I am conclusively saying that is an elite quarterback. That is a QB you look at, and he does not have any holes. Because during the regular season, there's no concrete way you can go to beat Lamar. He absolutely passes the elite quarterback benchmarks. But if you haven't shown that you can put up in the playoffs, and you can do the same thing with Justin Herbert, but it's a little bit more extreme, he's not quite as complete. If you haven't shown you can win in the playoffs, that is a hole in the game of an elite quarterback. I can't wait to see if he gets it done. Either way, this is going to be a really fun story, no matter who wins or loses. I don't care who wins or loses. Why even predict this game?
That's the thing, man. Both of these teams are built for Super Bowl runs. And it's insane that one of them ends in the divisional round.
That doesn't feel fair.
It doesn't, man. That's like, I honestly think you take both of these teams, you put them in a matchup against all of the other 30 teams in the NFL. And this weekend, I think I'd pick both of these teams to beat every single other team. I think the two best teams in the NFL are meeting in the divisional round. It's kind of sad, but it's kind of fun too, because This game's just going to be fantastic. Cards on the table, I'd been thinking about this game for the entire week. I predicted it like 15 minutes before we started airing. I mean, you literally saw me predict it, man. And you don't know what I predicted yet, but it caused me a lot of pain to pick against one of these quarterbacks and one of these teams and one of these coaches. But if we do want to get into the schematics a little bit, because it does matter, I do think this will come down to which QB can put their team on the back the most. This is a fascinating matchup because you've got 2 top 5 rushing offenses, each in their own right, versus 2 top 5 rushing defenses as well. And now this is an EPA and overall just eye test. I think that maybe the Bills' rushing defense hasn't been a top 5 rushing defense, but EPA says it is. So for numbers' sake, let's just say it is. In the cold weather, too. That adds a whole other atmosphere to it.
I think there's going to be precipitation this game. I think there's snow.
Really? Oh.
50 or 60% chance.
That would be exciting. Now, if it's snowing, I would give Allen an edge in that one.
Because his arm's just going to cut right through it.
Yeah, and also, I feel like he's just a bigger body. He's got less of a chance to slip in the snow, and it's just going to be harder to bring him down versus Lamar, who's not frail in any bit. He can knock a guy over, but he'll go down a little bit easier, and in the snow, that is a big factor.
That's true. However, Baltimore does have a player in the backfield who's got a little bit of size. He can run through a guy from time to time, and his name is Derrick Henry. I look at what they did to the Steelers, where they controlled that game as well as any team can, and I say, why can't that be the blueprint? Why can't your defensive game plan be keeping Josh Allen off the field and hoping that you get a mistake? Because I think the Bills are a very solid run defense. I think that they can control games against teams that have mediocre offensive lines that don't have difference-making tailbacks. However, it's just tough for me to see them going blow for blow with Derrick Henry. If that defense gets deflated, it helps open things up for Lamar, who, by the way, we did not see playoff Lamar in that game against the Steelers either. He looked very solid. It was an easy game script. It was. That's why I still have a little bit of a reservation potentially betting against Josh Allen in this one. But, man, the Ravens are just so complete offensively, and I think that the Bills' defense, like I said earlier, they will hold their own. They're well coached against okay offenses. I think that they can rally and tackle, and they can do a lot of damage. Against Baltimore, I think they can get shoved around.
Yeah, I agree, and that's been my biggest concern. If you want to point to a hole in Buffalo, it's that lack of a top 16 run defender on the inside. Every championship guy seems to have one, and you don't. Oliver, Daquan, they're just not those guys. So if this game goes against Buffalo, I think that'll be a big factor. They were just able to run, and nobody could get wins in the middle. But I don't think that will ultimately hurt them all that much, because this is just a team that every single time they go up against a good run team, in years past, they've gone up against good run teams, and that has absolutely hurt them. This year, other than the Ravens in Week 4, where they're missing like half their roster.
That was a long time ago.
They were missing a lot of their defense. Milano, Taron Johnson, I think Ed Oliver, another backup defensive tackle. They're missing another corner. Benford exited in the second quarter, and then a lot of offensive pieces too. That game doesn't matter for this game. If Buffalo loses, that will be a factor in it, that lack of an interior defensive lineman, though. I just think they've got a lot of guys. And I don't think the Ravens' offensive line is this world beater.
No, it's not. That is their biggest weakness, I think. It's just covered up by how well Lamar can beat the blitz and escape the pocket.
Yeah, and I think you've got enough guys that somebody's going to be able to win every time on that. So Linderbaum cannot overpower your elite run-stopping defensive linemen like most teams have, but you've got a lot of quality run defenders in there. You got Matt Milano back. He had an excellent game last week. Against Denver. Felt like he was all over the field, especially in run defense. So that's a thing that could affect it. But ultimately, you have to run the football, of course. You also have to pass the football. So maybe I give an edge to Baltimore in the run game. I'm going to give a pretty big edge to Buffalo in the pass game. Because who's Lamar going to throw the football to?
No Zay Flowers.
Zay Flowers is out. Rashad Bateman, I'm a big Bateman guy. I think he's been fantastic this season, especially at separation. He's not going to do that against Christian Benford.
He has like comically high EPA on the season.
He does,
by the way.
but
he's not going to do it against Benford.
When you watch him, it backs it up. He's really just developed in like his 4th year in the league or something.
It's really been a breakout.
Yeah. So you rely on your tight ends. The problem is you're going up against Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard. Terrell Bernard's had his moments in coverage, but overall he's been okay. I wouldn't say great. Matt Milano has been getting better every week. This is when they need him. That is why my matchup to watch is the Buffalo linebackers versus the Baltimore tight ends. Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews versus Terrell Bernard, and Matt Milano. If the linebackers shut them out, I have a hard time thinking that Baltimore is going to get anything consistently through the air. Lamar will be Lamar. He'll find his guys. You know what? He's going to get his, but he's not going to be able to do it as consistently, and we also don't know if Lamar can do it. In the playoffs, with no passing weapons, we've just never seen Lamar do it extremely consistently at a high level without Flowers and Andrews. So if you take away Andrews, Flowers doesn't play, Benford locks down Bateman, I'm going to give the edge to Josh because we've seen him do it all season with basically no weapons, except for Shakir.
How easy do you think things are going to be for Josh Allen to move the ball through the air in this one?
I think we talked a lot about the Ravens' defense's renaissance last week. The pass defense has been better. They've played a lot of bad teams. To be fair, I think it's real. This is a really good team. I don't think it's going to be super easy for Josh. But we saw them annihilate Denver last week like they were nothing. And Denver came out wanting to play. Playing good defense, Josh dissected them. And there was just nothing they could do. Another matchup that I really like Buffalo in, Josh Allen just doesn't get sacked. And we're like, surely the team with the most sacks on the season, Denver, second most pressure in the season, Denver last week, is going to get to him?
Nope.
No. I mean, they got to him. They just didn't sack him. They got pressure. Didn't matter. Allen threw the ball and completed a 3rd down and 13 every single time. And also, one of the best run defenses in football. We've talked a lot about how great Baltimore is in the run defense. Denver is statistically better. And on the eye test, they look better. Buffalo ran all over him. They couldn't stop him. They couldn't do a damn thing against him. How is Baltimore going to stop Buffalo's run defense? They have the better, more talented interior guys. Buffalo's got a better offensive line. Joe Brady's doing wonderful things with them. And they've been equally almost as unstoppable as Baltimore. So I think Buffalo's offense is going to have a slightly easier time than Baltimore's offense. Home field advantage may end up playing a role. I trust Josh a little bit more than Lamar in the playoffs at this point in time. I'm a big Lamar guy. All of the followers know it, but I'm going to lean Buffalo here. 31-30. Because I can't pick it more than a points difference because that's all you can win by, right? I'm going to pick Buffalo. I feel awful about it. I had been picking Baltimore. Baltimore was my pick pretty much all week. I canceled that and I went back to equal a couple days ago. Baltimore had been my pick since we knew this matchup was coming in the divisional round. I feel awful about it. I'm going to go Buffalo 31-30.
I like that you draw comparisons with Denver and mention how easy the Bills were able to move the ball against a really good defense. I do think that Baltimore has more overall talent than Denver does. I think that the Broncos have had to scheme it up more, and the Bills were able to really press their Josh Allen advantage in that game and cut through some of it. That being said, I still have more faith in Josh Allen, too. I have Bills 28-27, and I feel awful about it. My swing factor would have to be Roquan Smith because we talked about this with Denver. They're gonna have to tackle because you cannot beat the Bills if you don't have a really quality tackling game. However, then you look at Kyle Hamilton as well. One of the changes that the Ravens have made is using Kyle Hamilton less in the slot, letting Marlon Humphrey handle that, and I think that works out in their favor because you look at who the Bills' best weapons are. It's Khalil Shakir. I would say, do they have a better pass catcher than Khalil Shakir? He's their most reliable guy by far. And so if Marlon Humphrey is able to do good work against Shakir, and I also think that the Ravens are maybe a little bit more of a physical run defense than Denver. I don't think that they have to run quite as many run blitzes in order to shut down some of those rushing lanes. So if the Ravens are able to be a little bit more disciplined, if they're able to play with a little bit more force, and if they're able to tackle James Cook, then we could see the version of Josh Allen that has to press and could make mistakes, and Kyle Hamilton could get in there and force a big turnover. But when we have a quarterback who's shown that he can be that guy in the divisional round with no help, and a quarterback who played a really good game last week in an easy game script, but has had hiccups in situations like this in the past.
He also had a couple of mistakes in that game that looked very un-Lamar-like. I will say that. I hate to say it, but there was a couple times where I was just like, that ball, if that's in the regular season, he hits that a million times out of a million. There was a ball to Andrews, 3rd and 7, I believe it was. He just sailed it. He
was so shockingly efficient in the regular season. He was like the Terminator.
Yeah.
And he was not that against the Steelers.
Yeah. And it's like, that's the crazy thing, though. But we're nitpicking Lamar over one throw. That's the reputation he's built. But it's also like, you're going into Buffalo. Against Josh Allen, you have no margin for error. They also have no margin for error, but you have to assume that they won't make any mistakes, so you can't make any mistakes yourself. It's just going to be all-out war in Orchard Park this weekend. It's going to be fascinating. The one thing that I think Denver does better than Baltimore in the run defense, and why I'm kind of concerned about Baltimore, we talked about Buffalo's lack of a really elite interior defensive lineman in Shade. I don't think Baltimore has a run defending guy like that. Michael Pierce is good. How much of that is size? And whenever he's going up against that big guy, Osiris Torrance out of Florida, in the middle there, if that gets taken away, is he a non-factor? Travis Jones, not nearly as good as Zach Allen. And Zach Allen had a fantastic game last week. They still couldn't do anything about it. Zach Allen was plugging up holes. I don't think they're going to have a guy who's going to consistently make those plays. And the only way Denver got to Josh also was through the interior. Nnamdi Madubuike, you have a big game. This is a Nnamdi Madubuike game because none of these edge rushers. Also, a big way that they attacked Denver last week was going up against those small edges on the outside. Kyle Van Noy is not a very big guy. Tavius Robinson is. He's just not that good overall. And Trenton Simpson, Odafe Owe, David Ajabo, Malik Harrison, all of these are potential edge rushers. All of them are pretty small. Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown are going to take advantage of that. You're not going to get any pressure off the edge in this game if you're Baltimore. You're just not. I think you could get pressure off the edge of your Buffalo. Playoff on. It happened.
Yep.
It happened. He played incredibly well last week. Greg Rousseau. There are matchups on the defensive line I like for Buffalo more. Overall, all of this doesn't matter because it's going to come down to which QB ascends more. Which QB plays more like a god than the other.
You mentioned us nitpicking Lamar, and if we were reviewing that game and say, well, Lamar could have played better. Lamar needed to be better in that one.
He didn't need to. He played amazing.
That's one thing. However, that was, like we've said, that was an easy script. Not a lot of pressure because they were firmly in control. Could that be the cracks starting to show? This is a random-ass comparison, but what I think of is watching that Chargers-Texans game. And I think that the Chargers were either in the red zone or they were just outside of it. And Justin Herbert drops back and he's got Ladd McConkey on a corner route. And he overthrew him.
Oh, yeah.
He had him for the touchdown. And the Chargers were at that point in control. They were getting pressure. The Texans weren't moving the football. And they were just struggling to convert in the red zone. And if he puts that in the breadbasket, that's a different football game. And at that point, it still looked great for the Chargers. And something kind of dropped in my stomach. It's like, okay, that's one data point. Could that become more? And then the next drive, he threw his first pick to Kamari Lassiter. It wasn't an egregious pick. Lassiter made a great play on the ball.
It was an awful throw, decision. It was like a Jordan Love decision.
He shouldn't have put it up, and it spiraled from there. So even though Lamar was excellent in that game, and it's not wise to criticize him based on his performance in that game in a vacuum. If that gets worse away, like in an away game with weather, with all the pressure in the world against a fantastic Bills team, that's all it might take.
Yeah, and that's another thing I'm worried about. This is a tough environment to play in, especially in the playoffs. And Lamar, you got to have so much confidence. Like we talked about with CJ Stroud going into Arrowhead, you got to have a lot of confidence coming in. Bo Nix dealt with it well. I truly believe Lamar is going to deal with it well. He's an incredible player, and I don't think he should have any confidence issues, but that's another thing that could be going up against him. And you talked about cracks starting to show last week. The defense, it was really good in the first half. Came back out, got shelled a couple of times. Russell Wilson was making you look stupid on a couple of plays. A little drop in my stomach came. It was like, we can't revert to the Baltimore defense.
That is not a playoff defense. That is the Baltimore losing record ratings.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that bad. It was just like it looked like a league average defense. And when you're going to Orchard Park next week, and if you win that game, you're going to Arrowhead most likely the week after that. That's not going to fly there. You got lucky that you were playing Russell Wilson, and Mike Tomlin was scared in the first half, and they just did not do much in the first half. You got lucky, really, that they weren't able to do much of a renaissance, that their weapons weren't able to show up. Josh Allen isn't going to make those mistakes. If you give him a deep shot, he's going to take it, and he's going to make you pay. Talked about cracks starting to show. The only crack that you could say for Josh Allen showed last week, I watched every minute of that game, every snap of that game twice because I'm a Broncos fan. Of course, I review all the games. Josh Allen's only mistake was he threw a hospital ball that was perfectly thrown. He got his player injured. That sucked, right? That was his only mistake. He played perfect game, basically. Like,
the only crack I saw with Josh Allen was what he was taking on the sideline.
Okay. Oh, boy.
One last note on this game. Who does Nate Wiggins cover here?
That's a good question because there's not really a great matchup for him size-wise. You look at Buffalo's outside guys, Keon Coleman. I mean, Wiggins, he's admirable in the contested catch game. He'll go up there and he'll try, but against Keon's going to win those. And then the other side, we're running Mac Hollins. He's also big. He loves to play physical, right? Wiggins, that's a kind of a tough matchup. So, and then also Brandon Stevens. We talked about he's been serviceable.
He's been better than he was early in the year, which is an extremely low bar.
Yeah, you're better than the worst corner to ever play football, except for Noah Ekmanagani in his rookie year.
And Benjamin St. Juste this year.
So too, Washington. You're better than every corner that ever played for Washington. By the way, Marshawn Lattimore immediately comes into Washington, immediately sucks at corner. It's hilarious. Cornerback coach needs to be sent to he needs to be sent to the D3 level. But yeah, so you need to put a lot of trust in these outside corners, Stevens and Wiggins. That's another way that you could potentially falter. I feel like Buffalo's just a little bit more solid. I feel like I know what I'm going to get with them. I believe that they're going to give me more of I think that they're going to give me their best game more times than Baltimore gives me their best game in this one. But I cannot tell you that Derrick Henry running for 200, Lamar running for 100 on the zone read, and just running all the way to Arrowhead does not make me shiver making this pick. That's why I felt so bad. It was just I can easily visualize them obliterating the Bills on the ground. And it's just nothing Buffalo could do from there. It's such a tough game.
So I think it's fair to say that we see different perspectives on certain players from the more casual football fans and elite football minds like us who are an active part of the coaching carousel that we're going to be previewing soon.
Yeah, Chicago actually interviewed me recently.
You're not taking that job, right?
Of course not. Why would dude?
God, no.
The ownership? No.
One thing that I actually hear is that Josh Allen is some sort of playoff choker because he loses to Patrick Mahomes.
I think everybody loses to Patrick Mahomes.
And the games that he's played against Mahomes, Josh Allen is an extremely valiant playoff quarterback. He's the same guy that he is in the regular season, which is when there are QBs who have that playoff choker reputation, it's because they become a different player when the lights are on. And that's just not what Josh Allen is. He's been that guy in the playoffs. He's just been outdueled by some really, really good teams. And that's why I have all the faith in the world that he's going to wring every ounce of scoring out of this offense that he can get against a very solid defense versus Lamar, who could absolutely do it. We just don't know 100% for sure that we're going to get that version.
Absolutely. But it's also that Josh Allen thing, playoff choker. Well, he hasn't beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Well, Patrick Mahomes has been playing in the playoffs for this is his 7th year. 2 quarterbacks have ever beaten Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
Brady What was the other one they lost?
Burrow in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
The one time. Brady beat him twice. Burrow beat him once.
So you have to have a last name that starts with a B.
Well, I guess Kansas City's going to the fucking Super Bowl.
God damn it.
Damn it. Is there anybody in the NFC left? Stafford, Hurts, Goff, Daniels.
Bennett.
Stafford gets injured. Stetson does what he does best, and he wins a championship in the Super Bowl.
He's been there before.
Exactly. He's been there more times than Stafford has.
There we go.
Yeah, you heard it here first. That's a real Balls Talk Sports prediction. Stetson Bennett is the Super Bowl winning quarterback to dethrone Patrick Mahomes' Rams win over the Chiefs.
We've got a unique segment this time around. It was Victor's idea. You want to run us through it?
Yeah, so you know what? Obviously, we just finished predicting the game, so there's only 4 games this week, and that's still going to come out to like at least an hour of content that you all just listen to.
We still talk for a long-ass time about it.
Is it a Balls Tech Sports episode if it's over an hour? If it's less than an hour and a half? I don't think we have a single episode that's less than an hour and a half. We got to hit our time limit, or else YouTube isn't going to pay us the -3 cents that they do.
Not our time limit, our time quota.
Time quota, yes. We don't have a time limit unless they're knocking on our door.
That's still not a time limit.
Yeah, no, we're still going to talk
barricading.
about. We're still going to talk about Kalen Bullock, why he made the Pro Bowl for us. Remember that episode?
That was
but yeah,
looking even better in hindsight.
Oh yeah, it is. But we're going to go through all the 6 teams that lost this past weekend. For all of you fans that didn't get to hear your team talked about for 2 weeks in a row, your playoff team, we feel for you, as we both obviously are fans of teams that lost last week. Myself a Broncos fan, yourself a Packers fan. But we're just going to go through them, just be like, just quick comments on each of them, saying this was your season. Just going to do an ode to a good season for each of these guys, and maybe a slight look forward. We'll do a full look forward once the season ends, all teams, how they're projecting for next season, how the offseason might go. But we're going to get an early look at these 6 teams. I'm going to go in order from AFC's highest seed to the NFC's lowest seed, and that will begin with the Los Angeles Chargers.
This was a very, very good season for the Chargers.
Oh, yeah.
They showed a lot of fight under Jim Harbaugh, which I think is huge, and they did a lot with a little. They should be very, very excited going into next year because their rookies, particularly McConkey and Alt, absolutely hits. And they were able to get great performances from players that they weren't paying a lot. And even if some of those players go out and get payday sometime in the future, that ability to... We've seen this with the Lions as well, to bring a guy in off the street or an underrated free agent and get the most out of him, that's huge. That being said, can you win a Super Bowl with Justin Herbert?
Yes, I think you can. I think everybody that took Justin Herbert out of their top 5 this past week, I mean, I get it.
He was bad.
I need to see him perform in the playoffs, but he did, though. That's the thing. He played very well against Jacksonville a couple of years ago. They lost that game. Not entirely his fault. It's not his fault. Maybe his fault. I don't know.
Every single game with Justin Herbert, it feels like.
Herbert is still a very good regular season QB, but the fact that he's even being held to these standards of has to perform elite in the playoffs to be considered there means that he is probably a top 5 guy, because we don't see people held to those standards, especially Chargers quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, that's how Lamar made it whenever people were talking about him being a playoff choker. You got to be a playoff choker before you can become an elite QB. I feel like it happens with everybody. Josh Allen happened with him. It never happened with Patrick Mahomes because he's just special, though. But first couple of years, there was questions, can he get over the hump? And then he did. So,
I think I would maybe frame that from a slightly different perspective. I don't know that the expectations are that Justin Herbert has to be elite in the playoffs, because if he was elite in that game, I think they would have blown the Texans out. I think they would have jumped out to a big early lead, and Houston wouldn't have been able to come back the same way and surge in the second half. He was... I don't think he was trash in that game. I do think that he was actively bad, and more or less threw it away for him. However, that was not an easy situation to perform in. It wasn't as good of a performance from their offensive line against a fantastic Texans pass rush than maybe we were expecting. And like the outside receiver play, that's a non-starter. When you're leaning on Ladd McConkey as your only way to move the football through the air, that's just not really fair on your quarterback. Anyone is going to take their lumps in that situation.
Yeah, it is a tough situation. And don't get me wrong, Herbert deserves a lot of blame, and you need to see more from him in the playoffs. But ultimately, I think you can trust the amount of just really great games that he put together against good teams this year. So overall, this is a positive season. It does end on a slightly sour note, losing in a game you were favored in, a game you expected to win against the Texans in the playoffs. But overall, Harbaugh, he's a great head coach, clearly a success. Your first 2 picks look like future Pro Bowlers. In Alt's case, he is a Pro Bowler this year, I believe. You've got a lot of defensive contributors that you took from the draft. Tarheeb Still, Cam Hart come to mind. Just a lot of great solid players. And then you're going into an offseason with a fair bit of cap space, a couple of draft picks that you're going to go out there and you're going to get more talent that you trust this staff to develop. So this team, I find it hard to believe that they'll be worse next year than this year.
Definitely.
So they'll be back in the playoffs for sure. And then we can talk more about, can Justin Herbert win for once?
The way that I viewed the Chargers coming into the season, this wasn't even a team that was supposed to be mediocre. Maybe 7-10. This is a team that a lot of people thought was going to be actively bad, and they certainly were not. Last word, hopefully they get to keep Jesse Minter for another season.
Yeah, I don't remember. I think he did get a couple of interviews. I don't remember exactly where, but it seems like this has been a big year for head coaching interviews. Cowboys have interviewed, a bunch of guys. As I said, they interviewed me. I was surprised when I got the call. I wasn't that surprised, though, because
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's Jerry Jones. He hired Mike McCarthy. I'm a little bit worse than Mike McCarthy as a head coach. I'm a great floor raiser.
Yourself.
I think I'm similar to Mike McCarthy in that way. Do I bring a lot schematically? No. Neither does Mike McCarthy, though. He had to
Very Dan Campbell-esque.
I could raise the floor of that team. I can get those guys to fight for me, get a lot of national attention on the Cowboys. We know that's something that really doesn't happen much. Cowboys are never talked about in the media. But then you also... Yeah, and then you got the Bears interviewing a lot of head coach candidates. I believe they called you too, right?
Oh yeah, and I immediately hung up the phone.
Yeah, no, it's the Bears, right? We're not dealing with Caleb Williams. He's a bust. We're not gonna.
In hindsight, there may have been opportunity for sabotage, but maybe I'll call him back up.
Yeah. But you know what? It's the Bears and the Cowboys are interviewing a lot of guys, and a lot of insiders are saying it might be a surprise guy. Jesse Minter could be a surprise pick. I do think they'll get him back for another year, though. I think he has a similar conversation with Chris Shula. Both of the Los Angeles defensive coordinators had great seasons this year. They showed a lot, but they need both. I think most owners, most front offices are going to need more time to really be sure of what they're getting.
You got to know what you're getting when it's a defensive head coach in particular.
Absolutely.
You got to be certain that he is a defensive dude who is going to alter the way you play defense. Not just have guys playing fast and hard, but he's going to bring something schematically that is going to make you a nightmare to deal with.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, DeMeco Ryans was one of the best defensive head coach candidates we've seen in a long time, and I think it took him 2 years to get hired, I believe, right? He was the DC. So. Maybe he was only there for 1 year.
I think it was 2.
But I think it was 2. You got to be sure about defensive guys. And I'm not 100% sure about Minter or Shula. I think they will stick around. But I am fascinated to see who the Bears and the Cowboys hire. We will get to that in our coaching carousel episode a couple weeks from now. I think that'll be in tandem with our Ballstock Awards show and coaching carousel. We might add that to the end of conference championship week next week. We'll figure it out later. But
stay tuned.
Yes, absolutely. Stay tuned. A lot of jobs opening up.
Who we got next?
Now we got the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this is a fascinating one because you've got 2 guys that what do we think of them? First of all, it's the obvious one, Russell Wilson. Well, I know what I think about him. I'm pretty sure I know what you think about him, but knowing Pittsburgh, they're probably going to think long and hard before letting him go. You hope they don't bring him back, but they absolutely could, because there's just this standard of good, not great football that Pittsburgh has developed. It's a culture of winning until it actually matters to win. And that brings us to the second guy who you have questions about, and that is unfortunately Mike Tomlin. Can you win a Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin the way that this team is developing? I mean, Tomlin won a Super Bowl, so it sounds kind of insane to say, but the way that this team is going, they're never going to be good enough to take a quarterback high. They're not going to attract any big quarterbacks in free agency, but big quarterbacks don't even go to free agency anymore. You're not going to trade for a guy because this front office would never do it. Can Tomlin win a Super Bowl with the way that they love to play, which is a lot of great defense and a mediocre quarterback and a mediocre offense?
God damn it, Victor. They told me this year was different. I kept hearing this is a different Steelers team.
I was one of those people.
It was the same Steelers team.
It was the same team.
That being said, I am still a major Mike Tomlin appreciator because I don't think it's fair to pin the Steelers' struggles on him.
I agree.
Building a winning culture, I think, is huge. I'm not an advocate of tanking because I think it's very easy for tanking to get cyclical.
Yeah.
When you're... And tanking's a complicated thing because you're obviously not directly trying to lose. The players
and
aren't. The
don't
coaches
tank.
aren't. It's just the general franchise direction from an ownership and general management perspective. It's not a fault that Tomlin keeps having winning seasons because you can get quarterbacks late. I'm an advocate of getting a quarterback late, and whether you're letting him sit or just putting a really good surrounding situation for the rest of the offense, I think that can be hugely beneficial in terms of having your franchise QB build the right habits. I think that you just can't place this on Tomlin. I think he maximizes what the Steelers have, which tends to be a pretty solid defensive roster with not a ton of great offensive pieces. I look at the offensive line this year. This should have been a terrible offense, all things considered. They never should have had that hot streak early in the season with Russell Wilson where we said this is a different Steelers team. I feel that even though Tomlin's not calling the plays there, there's a good streak from Arthur Smith. He is a net positive.
You got to give Tomlin credit for that.
You got to credit Tomlin.
Yeah.
I think that he is a major net positive to the organization, and he just hasn't had the right hand dealt to him to take that team to a Super Bowl.
I absolutely agree. I brought up this question because I'm seeing it a lot in the media right now, and I figured it was an important question for us to bring up. I wanted to see what you thought about it, but I also wanted to spell it. I think Tomlin's a fantastic coach. I don't think this loss is pinned on him. Yeah, sure, maybe he should have gone for it on 4th and inches from like the 30, but you know what? He's an older... not age-wise, but he's been in the league for a lot longer. It makes sense that he might be reserved. And even then, the analytics don't completely support that play. Everybody just sees, it's 4th and inches, you go for it. They don't completely support that either way. But yeah, Tomlin, I mean, he is a floor raiser, but you can win a Super Bowl with him. I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with him and the current team, and that is not Tomlin's fault. I think it's the front office's fault. They are the ones settling for mediocrity year after year after year after year. They are just, we're going to roll with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, knowing that you don't have a Super Bowl winning quarterback on the roster, knowing that you don't have a guy who could be that. We're going to roll out Najee Harris and an offensive line that will get him 3.5 yards a carry. Though we're going to give them so much that he gets an 1,000-yard season. We're going to pay a lot of defensive players a lot of money. And the defense is going to be good, but in the big moments, they're going to be able to be figured out, ultimately, because every good offensive coordinator worth his salt is going to have a haymaker for any defense in the playoffs. And when you don't have a haymaker yourself on offense, and it's not just the quarterback part. Like you said, this offensive line shouldn't have succeeded. They succeeded because of Mike Tomlin. Isaac Sumalo, he's not that great of a guard before coming here. You got 2 rookies starting, Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier, and both of them are playing above what we thought they would be. Broderick Jones has not been great, and Dan Moore has been all right, but this offensive line overperformed. You're not surrounding your quarterbacks with many weapons either. You got George Pickens. He's a
good receiver in
an experience.
7 out of 10 games-ish.
And they also just haven't drafted well on the offense. This front office is the failure. I don't want to put this on Tomlin. I don't think Pittsburgh's going to win with Tomlin as their head coach, but I don't think it's because of Tomlin. I think by the time that this front office goes, I think that'll be when Tomlin goes because you just need an overall culture change. Don't think they're going to be a winning team until Tomlin is gone, and I don't think that's going to be because of Tomlin. People are going to put it on him when he's finally fired, and then they start winning again because this is a winning culture overall, which is something that Tomlin has built there. They're going to put that on the new head coach, and they're going to blame it on Tomlin that they've been mediocre so many years. It's not going to be on him. It's going to be on the front office.
It's almost comical how well Najee epitomizes the Steelers as a whole. I don't think he's ever averaged over 4 yards per carry in a season. Maybe not 4. He definitely hasn't averaged over 4.2, but he rattles off 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season. Breaks a lot of tackles, but his career long is like legitimately less than 40 yards. I looked at his stats and it blew me away, and he doesn't fumble, doesn't drop the ball. the comparison, it's just really funny to me. I don't think it's perfect, though, because Tomlin is a massive floor raiser, like Najee is, but I don't think he's a ceiling limiter. I don't think that Tomlin lacks the long speed that Najee does.
Yeah, I think Tomlin with the right QB could actually do something. It's just you need to have a front office that's going to have the balls to miss on a QB, because if you're going to take a QB or you're going to trade for someone, you got to be able to deal with the fallout. Carolina traded up their mother's left leg to get Bryce Young, and for a year it looked like they were the biggest idiots in the world.
They got their guy.
Yeah, and you got to be able to be okay with failing. Maybe it means your job is gone, but I took a shot, and I can go to bed at night comfortable with taking a shot. And you look at Denver. They went out in free agency. They got Russell Wilson. They paid him a boatload of money before he ever saw the field. Obviously, it didn't work out, but at least you did something. George Payton and Sean Payton wasn't there yet. George Payton, that ownership group, they took a leap. And Pittsburgh hasn't taken any leaps. So even to get a quarterback in the late rounds, you got to take a guy in the late rounds that you believe has a chance. You got to put focus into him. Brock Purdy wouldn't be Brock Purdy if Kyle Shanahan hadn't focused on him and made him feel like a guy who could actually be the starter one day. So Tomlin is definitely not a ceiling limiter, but quarterback position absolutely is. And if we're rolling out Russell Wilson or Justin Fields next year, there shouldn't be a single person in that front office who has a job by the end of the next year.
I find it really funny how, like, the last first-round quarterback that the Steelers have taken in years and years...
It did take Pickett.
...was Kenny Pickett.
I forgot.
Kenny Pickett.
But it's also like, yeah...
Kenny Pickett's not a shot. You're drafting Teddy Bridgewater at best.
Yeah, that's a great comp, actually. But yeah, you're taking Kenny Pickett at 20 when the nearest quarterback was Malik Willis at 73 or something, or was it Ritter at 69 or something? I don't remember.
It was right around there.
It was in the third round. So even when they do take shots, it is quite literally the worst shot imaginable. It's like, oh my goodness, Valentine! That is not the shot!
In that moment.
No, oh no! It's like everyone could have told you that was going to go wrong. And it did go wrong, obviously, because he was Kenny Pickett. It wasn't one of those Bo Nix things where everybody tells you it's going to go wrong, but most analysts said this could absolutely go right, and then it did end up going right. Everyone agreed. Best you're getting is a league average quarterback.
They drafted for floor in the first round.
And you can't draft a first-round quarterback for floor. You just can't. And it's emblematic of what this organization is right now. And I'd be really upset if I was a Steelers fan, because it doesn't look like it's going to get better.
You've got your head coach that can get you there if you put the right cast around him. Now you need the front office to take that step up and take that leap of faith. Who we got now?
Then, on the flip side, we got my team, the Denver Broncos.
You can have all of this, by the way.
I'll let you talk. I want to hear what you think. But, yeah, you've got a different kind of situation, a situation that for the first time in 9 years for the Broncos, there's some hope in the fan base, man, because you've got your guy at head coach. You think you've got your guy at quarterback. Defense looks fantastic, and everybody's playing better than they should, it seems. And that just never happens with Denver. You've never had the culture where everybody plays better. You haven't had that since the no-fly zone era of the early and mid-2010s. So that's emblematic of what Sean Payton's been doing. He's such a great culture guy, such a great floor raiser, and a ceiling raiser. He can do a lot with that ceiling, and then you transferred. They took a real shot with Bo Nix. That wasn't a guy that they were like, we're getting Kenny Pickett. No, we're going to go out there. We're going to take a shot on a guy we really believe in to save the franchise. If it doesn't work out, we're all gone in 2 years. They had the balls to do that when Pittsburgh didn't, and so far it worked out. Nix looked really good. We'll talk about Nix a lot over the offseason, just like we'll talk about all the rookies over the offseason. And there was some criticisms towards the latter half of the season about how Bo Nix played. And then it came out a couple days ago that Bo Nix was playing with a broken back since Week 12 in the Raiders game. So he was doing all this. By the way, one of the highest graded quarterbacks PFF-wise. PFF doesn't mean much. He had an 85 PFF grade in the Broncos game. You watch that game? He played fantastic. Like, he didn't miss much. And when he did, it was by a little. In Orchard Park, in the playoffs, receivers dropping everything you throw at him, running games giving you nothing. He was absolutely nails. So you got a rookie quarterback who went into Buffalo in year one with a team that had the highest odds to get the number one pick. Yeah, they didn't win. They got blown out. But he looked good, and this season was always about developing Bo Nix, getting him to look the best he can. Nobody ever expected to go to the playoffs. The fact that you got Bo Nix to develop and look the best he can while also going to the playoffs, there's nothing about this season that is a loss for Denver.
First of all, I appreciate that you shout out Bo Nix on the broken back. I find it bizarre and awesome and hilarious that his reaction to having a broken back was seemingly to become kind of a gunslinger. Like, that's not what I imagine. If I broke my back on the football field, my reaction wouldn't be, okay, I'm going to jack the average depth of target way up, and we're coming for blood now.
He's like, you know what? If it doesn't work, I can blame it on the broken back. If it does, I'm going to look like a fighter because I am a fighter. He's also a fighter. You got a head coach and a quarterback who are both guys who give a shit. You know, and everybody in the NFL gives a shit. But it's like that thing with...
There are levels to it.
Yeah, when you have a head coach and a quarterback who both give a shit and who both really want to win. Like Tomlin in Pittsburgh, he really wants to win, but he doesn't have a quarterback that really wants to win. I'm not saying Russ and Fields don't want to win, but it's different with some guys. It's that NFL Mamba mentality almost that both of those guys have, that all of the elite teams do. Andy and Patrick in Kansas City have it. You know what I mean? Jared, well, maybe not. I don't know about Jared Goff. Maybe Jared Goff and Dan Campbell. I think Dan Campbell has enough to make up for some of what Jared Goff lacks, you know. Dan Quinn and Jane Daniels, they might have it, you know. So John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson in Baltimore have it. All the best teams have that head coach quarterback combo where you have a lot of talent in both of those guys, which Sean Payton and Bo Nix have a lot of talent, and you have a will to win, a leadership about you, a true mentality that goes past just football. And that's a really good thing for Denver. And then you're surrounding them with a really good defense. You've also got a lot of cap space because you ate most of Russell Wilson's dead cap in this year. You got all your picks back. Doing this set back 2 years of first-round picks and all that cap space, sky's the limit for this Denver team. And there's no way that they're going to be a worse team. They're going to be a significantly better team next year, especially if they can get a big-time free agency get. I don't know, man. T. Higgins, like he came to Denver in week 17, and after that game, he was like, maybe this was my last time playing on the Cincinnati home field. Well, I mean, he saw Bo Nix play, and he was like, man, I got to play there. I got to play with him.
This season, I drew a lot of comparisons between the Broncos and the Chargers, and not just because they're in the same division. These are teams with really feisty, schemed-up defenses that I think play offense in a generally similar way.
I agree.
A lot of the time, and the Chargers were 2-0 in that series, right?
Yeah. Both of them were close.
I think I feel a little bit better about the Broncos moving forward, and part of that is just directly based on how they played in those games. The final score, I think, was actually a little bit more unfriendly toward Denver. However, like you mentioned, their quarterback was battling, and my perception of that game is not necessarily that the Broncos kind of got out-talented. I mean,
yeah.
would you agree with that? The defense magic kind of ran out a little bit, and what were you meant to do?
Their losses were mostly just because they didn't have the talent on the roster. Everybody on this team wanted to compete. Everybody gave their all. The schemes were great. Just didn't have that elite-level talent because you set back so far. You're in a rebuild. You lost 2 first-round draft picks and all that cap space. Of course they don't have the talent.
Well, you know what makes that really fixable? Is a quarterback on a rookie contract, which is reason number 2. And I think that's huge because Bo Nix was somewhere between an adequate to a quality starter. He got better and better over the course of the season and showed that he can win in a variety of different ways. If it's not a Super Bowl winning QB now, I think that Bo Nix has the development track to become that guy. Well, he's still fairly early on that rookie contract, and that is the most valuable asset in football.
I agree, and I don't know if Bo Nix will ever. I don't think Bo Nix will ever be on that Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson tier.
He doesn't need to be.
He doesn't need to be. When you've got a good culture, when you've got a good thing, like he can be a guy that your team wins a Super Bowl with. He can even be a guy that somewhat elevates the Super Bowl roster. I think he's got the potential to be a top 10 quarterback. I think he's got the potential to be it's kind of tough because there isn't really a tier of consistent. He can be a Matthew Stafford, I think. Not the same player, but that kind of guy who maybe he doesn't always give you the best performance, but at his best, he can go toe-to-toe with anybody. And you can absolutely win a Super Bowl with him. If you go on a Super Bowl run and he's hot, you can be a favorite in a lot of games like we're seeing right now. You can punch up and you can punch down. I think this year the Broncos proved with Bo Nix as their quarterback, they are absolutely a threat to basically anybody.
I'm proud to say, maybe Victor, this was your influence on me, that when a lot of people weren't taking the Broncos seriously as a team that could even make the playoffs, when they were just a well-coached team that was beating some really rough, untalented squads around the league, I was pretty much with you that, yeah, the Broncos are a legitimate playoff contender, and they're a team that I think can hang with some really quality football teams around the NFL. So I really enjoyed seeing their ascension. And also, they were fantastic in my weekly picks.
Oh,
Excellent bet against the spread. Just had to shout that out real quick. I really loved rooting for the Broncos this season.
Yeah. Well, this is a great time to jump on the Broncos train because the last 9 years have not been very friendly. But this year it's a fun time in Broncos country right now.
I'm a bandwagon fan.
Oh no, we love. If we get bandwagons, I'll be delighted. We haven't had bandwagons for a long time.
Now I think I know what time it is. Is it Packers yet or no?
No, it is. Packers are going to be last. We'll get to that. I know you.
Yeah.
I know we'll give you the mic on that because we'll have some frustrations about the last game and overall concerns about the team. But there is something like we're not there yet. First, we got to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was an interesting season.
It was weird.
Yeah, it was because it was like I don't think you lose this game if you have Chris Godwin.
No. Oh, certainly no. That game was like decided on a razor's edge, in my opinion. Those were two really evenly matched teams.
Like if this team's healthy, if you've had Winfield back if this was his first week playing back, he's more in groove. You have Godwin there. I think they win this game, and then they go into Philly, a team that they know how to beat.
They've got their number.
Like it just feels like this is a squandered season, but not really your fault. It's just injuries sucked this year. You had some tough breaks. You were on the bad end of a playoff miracle and a team with a lot of heart that everybody loves to love. We always talk about those teams that they're the underdogs and they're doing great things, but then there's a team like Tampa Bay who really was a good team and they deserve to win. They played a hell of a game and Washington just played a little bit better. So.
Tampa Bay was an underdog this season. They were a comeback story. They came back and won the NFC South. I don't have the record that they came back from.
4-6. They were 4-6. The Falcons were 6-4, and the Falcons had already beat them twice.
We more or less called that, didn't we?
We did. It was our Alive or Dead segment a while ago. Everybody was saying the Buccaneers were dead in the water, and we went out there and said, "Oh man, look at the schedule.
The Falcons are
look
deader.
At this team. The Falcons are dead." We called the Falcons dead, and we said the Bucs were alive. And man, that's the Balls Tech Sports predictions that's the ones we will bring up. The other ones in that segment.
The Bucs on the season, it's a disappointing year, but it's a disappointing year for valiant reasons. Like
it's not something that makes you discouraged going into next season.
They just kind of had it ripped away from them. It's a great example of, it wasn't your year. But this is still a team that's young enough and cheap enough to run it back. I think you feel better about Baker. In fact, I know you feel better about Baker. People will call him a Pro Bowl snub, and I might not agree with that on face value, but he was really nice this year. This was, I think, probably the best year of Baker that we've ever gotten. Yeah. He absolutely looked like a QB that could take you to a Super Bowl. Mike Evans kept the streak alive.
He did.
So, it was a little bit of a disappointing year with definitely a disappointing conclusion. This is still a team that really fought, and you feel good about where they're going, all things considered.
Yeah. And a big thing is also you're getting Liam Cohen back. I don't believe he got any head coaching interviews.
Oh, he didn't get any?
No, I don't think he did.
Wow.
But it's again, it's kind of that thing with Minter and Shula we talked about. You need to see another year, right?
That makes sense.
But he worked really well with Baker this season. He was a big reason why that offense worked so well. And you could really tell his influence on the offensive line with how you know Cohen's a good why I think Cohen's a good coach is he doesn't usually like to run the pulling guard system, like you get your guards in motion to the other side a lot, but he did a lot this season with Tampa Bay because that fit his guys, that fit his personnel. He loved what he saw with Barton and Mock on the move and said, we're just going to run that because that's what you guys like to run. and that is a sign of a good head coach. I'm not just going to put my scheme first. I'm going to design my scheme around what my players can do. I can use my genius in a lot of ways. So he's a really great OC. It's great that they're going to have him back another year. I think he will make a good head coach in the league. That'll be next year, though. So you get him for another year. And I think if you have one concern, it'd be Todd Bowles.
I think that's valid. I really do like having Liam Cohen back for another season. I've been, I think, more impressed with him than I've been with, say, Kellen Moore.
Yeah.
And if he's looking to really make that head coaching resume strong, I think there's something to be said about coordinators playing with a certain level of fire to them.
Yeah.
But, man, what happened with Todd Bowles this year? It felt like he was minimizing what's actually a reasonably talented defense. They were less than the sum of their parts.
That's the thing, though. Bowles, he showed a lot. Like, sometimes this defense was firing perfectly.
But rarely.
Yeah, it was like he showed enough flashes, but then it was overall, it was a great year for the offense. It was kind of disappointing for the defense. Injuries didn't help. And then you pair this with the fact that he's not the best game manager in the world. He had some pretty bad moments in that game against Washington. I will say everybody was criticizing him for how he handled the game management in the last 2 minutes. That is, the way that he did it was actually optimal game management. There was a situation where everybody thought he should have taken a timeout and went to Twitter, and everyone was like, how do you not take a timeout there? It was the correct decision to not take a timeout there. He played that very well, which actually gives me some, at least I know you can do it. But at the end of the first half, he played it awfully. The game management. So you don't have the game management. You're not this elite defensive mind. I don't hear about him as like this elite culture guy, but it's also hard to gauge culture guys if they haven't been there for like 10 years, because we're not in the locker room. It's hard for us to tell. But it doesn't seem like he has that elite floor-raising level. He's not the best coordinator. He's not a great game manager. What does he bring to the table?
That's a very valid question, because when you look
Other than beating Philadelphia. Sorry. If they had made it past this round, then that's where you get the Todd Bowles effect.
Some of the individual player performances were there, like Yaya Diaby took, I thought, a big step up in year 2.
He had a sack last week against Washington. I was like, holy shit, this guy is good.
And then Zion McCollum, is this year 3 for him? It's not year 4, is it?
Would be year 3. Yeah, it would be year 3.
He took a huge step up.
He absolutely did.
And I just got a question. Why does it feel like this defense is playing with less cohesion than, and when I say cohesion, that's different than your overall performance, because you can be a defense that punches down and that is busting coverages and feeling like you're opening up space. And that's the impression I got at Tampa Bay. They had some solid games. I really like that you brought up Todd Bowles, because now I feel a little bit more pessimistic about Tampa Bay. I'm going to leave it there. I like where they're going. You got to hope for a bounce-back season. I'll leave it there.
He's maybe all the Tomlin discussions we're having, maybe we should have those about Todd Bowles
instead.
That
is a great point.
I think that's a much more, because the front office is absolutely there, I think, for Tampa Bay. So
maybe a lot of great moves.
Maybe you have those concerns about Todd Bowles. Yeah, and I like what you said about cohesion, because it really feels like this Todd Bowles defense has never had that. And it's kind of hard to describe cohesion, but you kind of know it when you see it. It's like a linebacker seamlessly passing off a zone to a safety on like a Tampa 2 or something like that.
Or all 3 levels of the defense performing together as a unit.
Absolutely. It's just guys know where everybody else is on the field. They're selfless players. You know what? They I know it's cliche. They just don't. They make less mistakes. You just don't see as many coverage busts. Communication is rampant. I feel like a great antithesis to what's going on is Tampa Bay is Washington. Maybe they don't have them that much talent.
Definitely.
But they are a cohesive unit. And as we talked about earlier in the show, Dan Quinn and Bobby Wagner are a big factor in that.
Early season Arizona comes to mind.
Yes, absolutely. Just guys going out there and playing above their weight sometimes and communicating well and looking good together.
The Bucs defense felt like a unit where I was betting on a stronger performance than they had the previous week every single
felt like
week
the Jets offense
of the year. It felt just like the Jets offense. Yeah, but that's a whole nother level of dysfunction. You want to talk about cohesion?
Yeah, oh boy.
We should have a Jets show in the offseason, just bagging on the Jets.
Where we just do psychedelics and talk about Aaron Rodgers.
The Balls Talk Sports Experience podcast.
Yeah. We do psychedelics and watch the Enigma show.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, so that's Tampa Bay. Overall, there are a lot of good things heading in, but head coach is a concern. Now we're to one of the most insane late season collapses we've seen. One of the most insane and quick late season collapses we've ever seen. One of the most dysfunctional fan bases currently, with the way that they're reacting to this loss. The Minnesota Vikings are not having a good week.
Were they ever good? They were, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They weren't the last 2 weeks of the year. They weren't when it mattered.
They were not. And that's what happens when you have Sam Darnold, unfortunately. Sam Darnold, listen, man, he did such a great job this season for about 16 weeks. He played himself. He made himself like $50 million. And then in the span of 2 weeks, he lost it all. It was like you go to the casino, you go on an insane run, you're just about to leave, then you see a slot machine. Then you see a blackjack table. You're like, I could double my money. I could double my money if I just go out there and I put it all. I go out there, and then you hit. And then you hit, and then you get a 27, and then you lost all your money. And that's what it was like for Sam Darnold this games against the Lions and the Rams. He played himself out of a massive contract. It did make it easier on the Vikings. Maybe this is actually a positive for the Vikings that this happened, because now you don't have to pay Sam. You know you're not paying Sam.
I had the exact same thought, to be perfectly honest with you. And I don't think that either of us... Gotta stop spinning. I don't think that either of us were the quickest to jump on the Sam Darnold bandwagon. We both had our reservations about that. Because the system around him was really, really excellent. He had some rough games early in the season. Particularly the Jets game came to mind. That's when I was not out on Darnold, but when I kind of developed the take, I don't know if he can put together 4 or 5 good games in a row. Exactly. And then he had the Jags game, and that confirmed it. And then the strength of schedule actually escalated a little bit down the stretch, and he went from being a very solid quarterback early in the season who was maybe managing the offense a little bit and making some really nice throws here and there to a quarterback who was nails in big moments and was one of the best big-time throw guys in the league, the reason that he was drafted so highly in the first place. And so much of me wanted to convert all the way over, and 90% of me did. I'm glad that I stayed 10% grounded on Sam Darnold and at least held out like, I don't trust this. I need to see it in the playoffs. But man, I can't help but be disappointed because the tape that he put down, it was really good. It wasn't game manager tape. That was franchise QB tape as far as not just the big throws, but the processing as well. He did some great pressure mitigation stuff. And then the lights turned on in the 2 biggest games of the year. And he was really bad in both of them. I do have one thought, which is that Sam Darnold learned how to do a lot of things this year, seemingly. Can he learn to be clutch?
Yeah, that's...
I'm not going to pay him on the off chance he learns to be clutch, but for someone else, maybe?
I don't think Sam Darnold's a guy that's ever going to be clutch. I think he's a guy that... I do think he will get a contract.
Me too.
It won't be high. It won't be like a lead or anything. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million a year, which I know is insane, but Baker got $30 million a year. So, and then when he wasn't the Baker we saw right now. A lot of people... Kirk Cousins got 40 a year. I think Sam will get 30. But you know what? I was also there. I was like 90-10 in the Darnold train, and it was the Seahawks game, and it was the Packers game. The 2 weeks before the Lions, the final game, I was just like, oh boy, I hate myself, and I'm almost there, man. You put together a nice playoff performance, you're back. I'm 100% in.
I would have been too.
I'd pay you 40. I don't know if I was the Vikings, I would have paid him still, depending on how this postseason worked out, if he did play well. But then he let me down, as he let all of us down again, and the same issues came back. Going against Cover Zero, we talked about it in the wild card round preview. If Chris Shula would call it, he did. And he actually didn't call it that much. He called it more than he usually does, but he never called it. He never calls it. The Rams never called that. they called it more than they normally do. It worked when they did. And just Jared Verse, Byron Young, Kobe Turner were all making plays and getting to him. And Darnold under pressure looked like New York Sam Darnold. And then again, we saw the same thing. He just, last 2 weeks ago in Detroit, when he was under pressure, he was missing high a lot. This past week, even when he wasn't under pressure, you could actively see him becoming worse, becoming less confident, missing those throws high again. And it was just disheartening to see.
There were some games where Matthew Stafford was kind of rough this season as far as bad decisions or uncharacteristic sprayed throws. That felt like you were just getting the low end of kind of a high-variance aggressive quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam Darnold the last 2 weeks has looked like a total deer in the headlights.
This isn't one of those, oh, he just had a bad game. This is, if he's attacked the right way, this is the kind of guy he really is. So a good team will know this. They'll know that going in. They'll design their team. Maybe if they're going to use him as a bridge, they'll be like, we think we have the pieces necessary to mitigate those issues from Sam. Put together a good year. The next year, we're going to go for our guy. Maybe a team that drafts a quarterback this year. Maybe you really like Cam Ward. And you're like, I don't know.
Or Jalen Milroe.
Oh, no. Jalen Milroe is actually ideal because he's not playing for 2 or 3 years.
He better not.
No, he should not play for a while. So maybe you draft Jalen Milroe. You pay Sam Darnold the intention of drafting Jalen Milroe. Maybe. Might work.
I'm showing Victor a picture of Sam Darnold's face right now. Victor, is this the face of a clutch quarterback?
No, it's not. And I hate to say it, but it's not. And it's also like, he's never had the name either. He didn't pass the name test, in my opinion. Sam Darnold.
I would agree. Is his full name Samuel?
Maybe. But I feel like let's do that real quick. Name test and all of the draft quarterbacks real quick. Shedeur Sanders passes.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely
easily.
passes. Cam Ward, I think he passes it. That's a cool name.
Jalen Milroe does as well.
Jalen Milroe passes. Quinn Ewers, unfortunately, does pass.
I would say so, yeah.
Is there any quarterbacks we're missing right now?
I literally have my board open. Jackson Dart. Oh hell
boy,
yeah.
that
Jackson
passes,
with
yeah.
an X. Let's go.
Jackson Dart. And Dart throws a dart down. I feel like Kevin Harlan would say that.
It's so easy. Curtis Rourke.
Is it Rourke or O'Rourke?
Rourke.
Ooh.
Straight up Rourke.
He's got a backup quarterback that wins you a wild card game.
Definitely. Dylan Gabriel has 2 first names. That's usually a good sign.
It is.
Riley Leonard, same thing there.
Yeah.
Will Rogers.
That, just for all the jokes announcers could make for sure.
That's fair. DJ Uyunglele. He's way down on there.
Is he on a draft board anywhere? I thought he would have already applied to Wendy's by now.
He's in the UDFA section. He's next to Zach Zabrowski from Central Missouri.
Yeah. I don't have him on my draft board, but shout out to you for having him there. But yeah, so he passes. He does not pass the name test, and that was a death sentence for him. It really was. But yeah.
But now you see what J.J. McCarthy's got on a rookie contract. Swing for the fences, baby.
So yeah,
I'm excited.
Apart from Sam Darnold,
I'm a Packers fan.
Apart from Sam Darnold, you've got the coach of the year in Kevin O'Connell. You've got a top 10 draft pick in J.J. McCarthy, who got a year to rest, even if it was on a torn ACL, which not ideal, but he did get a year to hopefully develop a little bit. He should never have started immediately. That was a stupid idea. So you hope that he comes back from injury fine. You've got a good roster. You got the best wide receiver in football. Got a good offensive line. That's also another thing. You're missing your all-pro left tackle in Christian Darrisaw.
Great thing to bring up.
He went down halfway through the year, and you could... An elite left tackle is one of the most valuable things in football, and Minnesota had it. They expected to have it going into this year. And Cam Robinson was a valiant idea. He was a decent replacement midway through the year.
It was a smart idea based on what they'd seen from Sam Darnold up to that point.
And Cam did a good job. It's just Darrisaw is a top 5 offensive tackle in football, in my opinion. Probably. And there's a lot of great offensive tackles, so maybe he can go toe-to-toe with the top 5.
He's in that tier.
He absolutely is. So you're missing him a lot. And then you got a lot of guys you paid last year who went out and outperformed it. Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, 2 great edge rushers. Flores... Who knows if he's going to get a job? I doubt anybody's going to touch him.
I don't think so.
I don't think anybody... It's kind of the same thing with Vance Joseph. It's like you saw him fail once as a head coach. where the locker room wasn't great.
Yep, that's just it.
The coordinators weren't great. The scheme wasn't great. But he's done a great job as a DC, and you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want to give Flores and Joseph the benefit of the doubt that they've improved their ability in the locker room and can be better culture guys. Because there's some guys that fail their first time around, and then they come back, and then they do a great job. It rarely happens, but it does sometimes. I don't know if anybody's going to give either of them, Joseph or Flores, a shot this year. I think both of them deserve another. Maybe not Joseph. I think Flores deserves another chance. Maybe next year, though. So you're probably going to bring him back. You got KOC. You got two of the best coordinators in the league. A lot of elite talent. You can... Dallas Turner, you hope, takes a step next year. Didn't see much of him. But next year should be a prime breakout for him. You want to invest in your secondary. And... there's just not a lot of weak links on this team. Invest in your secondary, invest in your interior offensive and defensive line, and you're primed for a playoff run next year if J.J. McCarthy looks great. So it's an awful end of the season. It really is. Disheartening. But not all hope is lost in Viking land.
I maybe think that the narrative that the Vikings don't have any defensive talent and Brian Flores is crafting all this with hay and tax is maybe a little bit overplayed. Like, they've got guys. I think they're very average in overall defensive roster talent. But imagine what he could do with the money that you can spend with J.J. McCarthy on a rookie contract. Yeah. This could be... And you remember that year the Vikings were like a really fluky playoff team? They won a whole bunch of one-score games. That was the Vikings, right?
Minnesota Miracle?
No, they were like 9-1 in one-score games.
They haven't won a playoff game in a long... Oh, that
and
was...
then they lost first round.
Yeah, to the Giants, yeah.
Yes. I don't think that this season was that. This was a legitimately good football team that had dominant stretches. They just got figured out at the wrong time.
Yeah.
I think that they could be an even more stable team next year. Maybe not 14-3, but the same amount of good, the less amount of solvable.
I'd rather be 12-5 and consistent and stable than 14-3 and whatever the hell we just saw for the past 2 weeks. So I know you go out there, you get some talent on the defensive side. You've also got a lot of talent. Grenard, Van Ginkel, Byron Murphy. If Harrison Smith sticks around another year, he's still got a lot. Stephon Gilmore is a player. Cam Bynum looked decent this year. You've also got a stud in Blake Cashman. Ivan Pace is great playing downhill. And Dallas Turner. I was a big Dallas Turner guy coming out. I hope that he can break out next year. You get him some more talent, though. He's definitely not going to run the same thing. That's the thing about Flores. He's just such a great defensive mind, such a great football mind. He's going to figure something out, no matter what. But if you give him talent, it could be special. It's all going to. But now it's all on McCarthy. What can he do? This entire team is going to ride on JJ's shoulders, and if it doesn't work out, Quasi's probably gone. They'll probably keep KOC, but you never know. But it's all on him now, so you've fallen into it's on the rookie quarterback.
Was Dallas Turner your edge one last year?
Yeah, I can't remember. It was so close between him and Latu. I think it may have been Latu.
And they're they're stylistically different. It depends on the team.
I was so high on Latu. Exactly, it depends on the team. I was so high on Latu on Turner. I liked Turner more for Minnesota than I liked Latu.
I think he fits their system better.
Yeah.
All right, now it's that time, isn't it?
I'll let you take this one.
So the Packers, tough loss against the Eagles. It was dispiriting to watch. We can all have our opinions about the opening play with Keyshawn Nixon where he gets decked and clearly gets the ball back and then has it ripped away. And we have a Skycam angle that clearly shows him getting the ball back, but the referees don't have that angle. Victor, is it reasonable to ask, why don't the referees have that angle that we all have? Am I missing something there?
It's reasonable to ask, but I think the reason is because the NFL officiating is full of a bunch of idiots.
Oh, yeah. That does line up pretty well. That game sucked to watch because the Packers should have been in that one, and they were in it, but they should have been even more competitive than they were. The offense did drop the ball a little bit, figuratively and literally. and I hate to say it, but that game was essentially what I expected. I should have been a little bit lower on the Philly offense like you were, but we were both very bearish on the Packers offense, and that's exactly what we saw. I take some solace in the understanding that Green Bay got out-talented in that one in large part. It felt like we saw the worst of Jordan Love. He was clearly pressing and not super comfortable, and this was just never going to be a favorable matchup for Green Bay going against a very sticky, physical, aggressive, well-coached secondary with pass catchers like Tucker Kraft and Dontavian Wicks and having Jaden Reed as your number one option. Josh Jacobs had flashes of being Josh Jacobs, but it was never going to be the right script for him to get going. I thought the defense played with fire, and I did think that the defense overperformed. They were able to pierce the Philly defensive line a couple times and get Jalen Hurts uncomfortable and get him on the move. Of course, the Packers kicking issues that we've had for every year since Crosby came back and bit us in the ass at the wrong time. That game was winnable if everything went right, but the team was beat up. It wasn't a good matchup, and the final outcome ultimately didn't surprise me. I'm not to the point where I'm asking, can you win a Super Bowl with Jordan Love? I still think that you can. I think there's a lot that he does well. I think he can be that guy in the playoffs, but I wish we played a weaker team. I wish we weren't in the NFC North and we had a chance to truly go toe-to-toe with a team that's evenly matched in terms of roster talent. It didn't feel quite fair. But I especially liked seeing the defense battle. I thought that meant a lot. I thought Jeff Hafley was a very good defensive coordinator in year one, and I'm still optimistic about where the team is at going forward. This year's draft was fantastic, all things considered.
Yeah, Hafley, I like what you said. Hafley did a great job, not only in this game, but like we talked about it. It was Hafley has to call his best game as a coordinator, and yeah, he probably did. Like, that was a great game.
He answered the call.
He did, and you've got good coordinators. You got a good head coach. This year's draft, who were the Packers draft? Well, you lost Jordan Morgan in the first. He drafted him in the first round, lost him to injury before the season started. That's a bummer from the start, and because he was supposed to be a pro-ready guy coming out of Arizona, tackle/guard. You really could have used him this year, and you'll get him back next year. Overall, I don't remember who you guys took later, but
so Edgerrin Cooper, who should have been on the field sooner, looks like a stud.
Great player.
Javon Bullard was a huge add for the Packers.
Big.
Marshawn Lloyd has just been, like, the poor guy. He's had 4 different injuries. That was never fair.
That was kind of the risk you were taking with Lloyd.
That's
such
fair.
A small guy.
Tyron Hopper felt like the obligatory Gutekunst roll up a pick and throw it in the trash.
Well, which is what we thought, I believe, the next pick.
Of Evan Williams, who looks awesome.
I had that graded as like a D-, which was by far one of my biggest misses of this draft. Williams has been fantastic.
And then, naturally, Jacob Monk, who doesn't pass the name test by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion, did not get on the field. Ketan Oladapo certainly does pass it. And so down the board, not a whole lot. But Gutekunst, I think, is a fascinating drafter because he marches to the beat of his own drum, and sometimes he just plays it a little bit too far out, like A.J. Dillon, for example, was an objectively terrible pick. But sometimes it works out really favorably, like the double-dip strategy with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, Jaden Reed in round 2. I think it's back-to-back-to-back drafts of really solid picks, especially in the mid-rounds, and it's built the youngest team in the NFL and an overperforming team.
Absolutely. One more thing to say about the Philly-Green Bay game. It was a bad game. Also got really bad injury luck. Like,
yes.
I'm just off the top of my head. I think at one point that offensive line was running Andre Dillard, Kadeem Telfort, Jacob Monk, and
when it was Andre
the right
Dillard
tackle,
in the game,
Travis Glover. He was in there at some point, I think.
When Dillard and Glover were in there, you were watching the TV and going, well, shit, what do you do now?
Yeah.
Going against Philly, of all teams.
You needed a vintage Green Bay performance from the offensive line, and then Josh Myers also got hurt, which...
Josh Myers, fits in that line with Glover and company.
When he got hurt,
a healthy player.
When he got hurt, the broadcaster, I can't remember, I think it was Burkhart, he was like, oh, it sucks to see him, and he was having such a good season, too. And I was like, listen, man, it sucks to see an injury, but let's not just lie, all right, because Josh Myers was not having a good season. But yeah, that hurts. And then on the defensive side, TJ Slayton went down at one point. Devontae Wyatt was down at one point. You had a couple corners go down. I believe Valentine was off for a couple of plays maybe. I don't think Bullard played the entire game. I think Enagbare, I think he went down too. There was just so many injuries. Speaking of lighting picks on fire, this was a 2023 pick that I hated, Sean Clifford.
That was
What
so
did that do?
objectively inexplicably bad.
What did that do?
I don't even. You could have gotten him as a priority UDFA. I heard a take that they drafted Sean Clifford to give Jordan Love some comparison to help him feel good about himself, like fake competition. And I think that unless he was actively getting fed false information about how wanted Sean Clifford is in front office circles, it's so bizarre.
Yeah, you think Kwesi just came just called Butte and was like, man, you want to make a trade, 4th round? I don't think Sean Clifford's in the 5th round. I don't think Sean Clifford's going to be there by the time my pick is there. He might be there by the time your pick is there. I want him. He's like, no. And then he just drafts Clifford because he wants to spite the Vikes.
They were on the phone talking about something else, some other front office move. And then Gutekunst just overheard, Clifford, Penn State, QE1, now!
Penn State and
Anyway.
QB1 is that's a great pairing that we'd love to see. But yeah, overall, you're missing a lot this season. Jair Alexander also didn't play in this one. That hurt.
I thought that really capped the playoff upside of
You
the
could
Packers.
really
They were
tell.
just going to get beat in the secondary bad at least once if they won this game.
But there was outside of the quarterback conversation, most of the season was a positive. Hafley was great. LaFleur did a good job calling. You have your backup quarterback, the future Malik Willis. You hit on a lot of picks. Edge, Evan Williams, John Von Bullard. And then you got a couple of free agency additions that meant a lot, namely Xavier McKinney, who looks like a Pro Bowl safety. I think he made the All-Pro team, first-team All-Pro.
I believe he did.
So X is a fantastic player. You get him in there.
Josh Jacobs added a new dimension to his game after previously already being an exceptional running back. I feel like it was a privilege watching Josh Jacobs every game.
There's always been this idea around Josh Jacobs that he's an inefficient guy that cannot break runs.
He's like a Najee Harris.
Exactly. That people comped them, and I was like, no, Josh Jacobs is a fantastic back, and he showed it this year in Green Bay. Tucker Kraft looks like a top 10 tight end in football.
Zach Tom took a step up.
Zach Tom, he had a couple misses in this past game.
He did, yeah. That was
but
costly.
it happens.
I still feel good about him.
When everything was going wrong, it's hard to put the blame on one guy, and it's hard to... You made a mistake. Everybody made a mistake today. Let's wash it. Let's have a goldfish memory. Let's move on to the next season. Rasheed Walker was adequate, I feel like.
I think we can officially say that Rasheed Walker is a starter at the offensive tackle position.
Maybe the receiver room was a slight disappointment. You wanted to see more steps forward. You saw a lot of steps forward from Jaden Reed, but that was about the only guy that really took a step forward. Malik Heath lost you the game because he just did step in back. He caught the ball and was like, I'm just not going to get both feet in bounds on 4th down and 2. When it's 4th and 2 and you're calling a play designed for Malik Heath, I think you're just admitting you lost the game, though.
Dontavian Wicks may be better.
Or maybe. I mean, they'd both probably be better at, like, I don't know.
Wicks wouldn't have gotten a hand on the ball.
No. Wicks wouldn't have gotten open. And it was like they weren't guarding. There's nobody in the radius. I think it was a coverage bust, and Dontavian Wicks would have ran the wrong route or something. But overall, a lot of good things went your way, but it left you with a massive question at quarterback in Jordan Love. I've always been a Jordan Love guy, but this game does concern me a lot. And it's all of the things that we worry about with Jordan Love packed into one game. And we're going into year 3 of Jordan Love playing, year 5 of his NFL career. I feel like you should be further along about like this. Especially considering you played so well against the Cowboys last year. You had some bad moments against the Niners, but overall, I think that was a net positive game from Jordan Love last year. It's not that he's a bad playoff performer. This was just a step back.
Love is an extremely aggressive quarterback. The question that he did not answer definitively throughout the season is he aggressive or is he reckless? Because he had flashes of both, and he definitely walked too close to the fire all throughout the season. It just really came to the forefront in this one, and he needs to clean that up if he's going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I still think he can. We need to see it.
Yeah,
and it needs to happen next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can't go into year 4 of the Jordan Love experience being like, can we win with him? You just can't. But also, you paid him all that money, so you have to. right? You have to.
The bet is made.
You're tied to him for another 2 years, so you have to do that.
We know who the Packers quarterback is going to be.
Exactly. We know who the Packers quarterback is going to be in 2027, unless he's like Russell Wilson bad over the next 2 years.
God, let's hope not.
Let's hope not, but man, Love has got to put...
Would Denver want him in that case?
Hopefully Bo Nix will be good, so good by then that they won't even think about picking up the phone. Hopefully. But it's tough calling the season a win when there was such high expectations going in. But most of this roster did improve. Most of it overperformed. Just a couple areas that hurt you. Injuries in the quarterback position leaves you with some questions. But isn't there always some questions around Green Bay? It can never be easy.
The regular season, which I think paints a better picture of how good the team was overall, was stronger for Green Bay, despite the fact that they were just playing in an absolute buzzsaw NFC North.
But that's the thing. They went 1-5 in the division.
And that unnerves me a little bit. However, not all of those games were decided by a score. They lost by 10 to Detroit, and that was like a big 10 points. Detroit had a stranglehold on that game. Even though we didn't get in the win column against Detroit and Minnesota, because I'm not counting the Bears game. I'm going to say that game wasn't real. Even though we didn't get in the win column, I don't think that we showed that we couldn't have gotten in the win column. Now, there's something to be said for how the Packers in almost every one of those games got off to a pretty big early deficit and had to climb back from it. However, the fact that they had that gear to get back into those games, I think shows what we could see earlier on in the future with a little bit of a stronger roster. That's why I'm staying optimistic.
If you need something, if I'm Matt LaFleur and I can just drill one thing into these guys on the offensive side of the ball's minds over the summer, if I know there's one thing I'm super pissed about, you got to hold on to the football.
Oh, damn right you do.
Every single one of those games, you got out to a bad start because we fumbled the ball in like the first quarter. I said coming into this Eagles-Packers game, you cannot fumble the ball in the first half like you've done pretty much every game that you have lost. First play of the game. First play of the game. You fumble the football. Even if you recover, it's inexcusable. These guys need to hold on to the football. And it's partly the youth thing, but it's inexcusable. You're an NFL player. You need to hold on to the ball, especially... that is a big reason why they got out to some of those deficits. So that is something that LaFleur is going to need to drill into them. If you fumble the football, I will break my foot off in your John Brown hiding parts. He needs to channel his Denzel Washington from Remember the Titans and get them to hold on to the ball.
Is it bad that I'm kind of a certified Keyshawn Nixon hater?
No. You got to hate one guy on your team with a passion.
I think Keyshawn has been around for about 2.5 seasons. I think he was a mid-season pickup 2 years ago. And it looked like this man had a gift for the kick return because he was batting like 700-800 on those. And I remember there was one he took out of the end zone from like 8 yards deep, and it was like, Keyshawn, what the hell are you doing? And then he gets to the 40, and it's like, does he have Cordell Patterson level vision as a kick returner? Does he see the creases in slow motion? And then he gets a full season sample size, and he does that thing every single time where he takes it out of the end zone, and then he kind of bends it to his right, and then he gets hit in the lower half and falls down at the 23-yard line. And then in the Philly game, first kick, it was an oh shit sort of moment. What is he going to do this time? And sure enough, he runs it out of the end zone, and he kind of bends it to his right, and he gets decked by Oren Burks, former Packer, and coughs it up at a very bad spot. The Packers, in questionable special teams decisions to return the ball, don't usually mesh well.
You know what makes that hurt more? Oren Burks, also a former 49er. So 49ers are still beating the Packers in the offseason.
We can't escape those motherfuckers.
Yeah, but Nixon, he's like the guy you draft in the running back you draft in the third round because he's just so electric, but he fell to the third round because every single run he bounced it to the outside.
Exactly.
And he's a better athlete than all of these guys that he's playing, but then he gets to the NFL and all of these guys are elite athletes and he goes for 2 yards loss every time. You know? That's what Keyshawn Nixon is.
If I had to summarize him, I don't remember what team it was or even what year it was. But it was like second kickoff of the game. He's 8 yards deep in the end zone. He takes it out and gets tackled at like the 19. And then later on, there were like 10 seconds left in the first half. Packers down multiple scores. It's a kick to the 2. Grabs it and kneels it down.
Oh, man.
So that's my memoriam on the Packers season. I think that we both feel pretty favorably about our team's performance overall. We didn't have to be fans of bad teams. We didn't have to be fans of teams that were rooting for better draft positioning. Two really competitive franchises whose seasons were cut short, but real reason to be optimistic looking forward.
Oh, yeah, and the Broncos, I believe, are picking 20th in the draft this year. And let's see on the Packers. The Packers are going to be picking 23rd. So both in the mid-20s, obviously, but the Broncos a worse record, so they're going to be a little bit higher.
Before we get out of here, early predictions on who the Broncos and Packers pick.
Yeah, so you know what? I just started diving into the tape this past week. One player a day is what I'm trying to do. I look at receivers early on, and immediately I love Colston Loveland for the Broncos. I was telling you about him. I really like him as a player. I just think he fits the Broncos really well. Sean Payton looking for that kind of guy that he can do everything with, and Loveland can do basically everything except block consistently. And you know what? You would love it if you can get a guy that can block consistently. You just need playmakers to surround Bo Nix with, and man, you're going to have a hard time finding a better playmaker at the tight end position than Colston Loveland. When it's all said and done in this class, there's not going to be many tight ends in the past few years that I know I'm going to have had a higher grade on. I know Pitts and Bowers are going to grade higher than him, but man, I've been doing tight ends since 2021, Kyle Pitts' year, and he's one of the most impressive guys I've ever watched. So Loveland to the Broncos for sure. What do you think for the Packers?
We're taking Jalen Walker from Georgia.
Is he going to fall that far? Is the question. I've seen him mocked in like the teens.
You're right. Too good of a player. Micah Williams from Georgia.
Yeah, he's going to go in the top 10.
God damn it.
Oh, I got it. Quinn Ewers.
So what I did is I just went to my board and I searched Georgia and looked for players that aren't very heavy because you got to cross the athleticism threshold.
Oh, of course.
I thought about Jared Wilson, center from Georgia.
That's good.
Replace Creed Humphrey, but we don't go offensive line in round one. That's later.
Well, you took Jordan Morgan last year.
That's true.
That was also not a great pick.
No, that was.
I liked Morgan.
Pick.
I was it was a weird pick. I had him graded as a round 2 prospect, bordering. I think he was like 40th overall for me. Low, kind of a high floor, low ceiling kind of guy. But Packers, yeah, if they're going to take a guy from Georgia, then maybe I think Jalen Walker is the classic Packers pick. Pick a linebacker in the first round.
It would be if he falls
an athletic
that far.
linebacker. But realistically, I don't know. You already have a bunch of defensive linemen. I like Tyleik Williams. Maybe you can stop the run a little bit better. Probably need another corner.
Absolutely.
Go after
corner is, I think, where the Packers are really looking round one. I hope.
I like Sharon Revel out of East Carolina as potentially. I don't know if he goes that high, but I'm a little foggy on who the 2025 corners are. I mean, I have a list.
It's a messy cornerback class.
It kind of is because Hunter and Johnson aren't making it to you. Yeah, Ben Morrison out of Notre Dame. Maybe I'll tell you this. I love Jade Barron out of Texas. I don't know if he'll probably be there by the time
I would definitely think he's been a fascinating story. A guy who played a lot of slot, kind of a big nickel type, moved outside and somehow looked more athletic.
Yeah, and you can always go receiver. Like you have a lot of receivers. You don't have any guys, though. I don't think there is any guys that I would really say.
Isaiah Bond.
That would be a Packers pick.
Yes.
That would be a Packers
Isaiah
pick.
Bond in the 3rd round. We'll add him to the pile.
Another guy I think the Broncos could draft is Egbuka. Just because
that would be a great fit.
You just need a guy who can get open. That's the one thing the Broncos are really lacking. Sutton can get open, but when everybody looks at him, nobody else can really get open. Vela can catch, but he can't get open consistently. Mims can get open deep. He's fast. He can run after the catch. He's not going to get open in the intermediate to short range. Egbuka lives underneath and in the intermediate. He'd be perfect for the Broncos.
So those are our early draft takes, and they're going to be a lot more where those came from.
Oh, yeah. Draft season's going to be insane. I'm getting the itch already.
I'm so excited. And that's going to do it. Our teams may be dead. Rest in peace, Green Bay Packers.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Denver Broncos.
But our ball knowledge certainly isn't. Any final remarks before we get out of here?
Man, well, I said it last week. I said that this was going to be a great weekend, and it was really fun to watch. Maybe it wasn't as good as we thought it would be, but I think this is going to be a great weekend, too. I think all of these games... I predicted all one-score games. I hope it is that. And I don't think I've ever been as excited for a playoff game this early as Buffalo-Baltimore. It's going to be a fun week.
I think Wild Card Weekend was about as wild as we expected. A lot of outcomes where you look at it and we're like, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, still wasn't close, but I did not think Houston was going to win 32-12.
That game is so weird because that wasn't really a blowout.
No.
That was like... I wonder how long in that game that the Chargers were leading. Maybe like 20 minutes in? 25 minutes in? They had a 7-6 lead for quite a while.
No, 6. They were down 7-6 at one point.
And, because Houston scored the touchdown.
Yeah.
It was... Yeah,
that would have been.
6-0.
They would have been leading for at least 20 minutes, 25 maybe.
And then a switch just absolutely flipped, and Justin Herbert was legitimately bad. Which is, I'm sorry, we didn't factor in Justin Herbert throwing more interceptions in the playoffs than he did in the regular season. And then Houston ran away with it. So even that, just a very all-around weird game.
Weird weekend, and this will also be a weird weekend. We went 3 for 6 last week. Not great. But you know what? It's okay. It's all right that we went 3 for 6. I'm not mad at all. This week I'm going to go 4 for 4. You're going to go 3 for 4. Oh, actually, one thing we forgot to do last week. We were going to announce the Ball Stock Sports official ball knower, which is the person who had the highest win percentage in their picks in the regular season. So
It was definitely Victor.
I think it was definitely me because I had a great last week 18. But let's just make sure it's me before I anoint myself. And I will get first pick in some draft that we do this offseason.
The actual NFL draft.
Yeah, no, instead of, who is it, Tennessee? I mean, I'd make a better pick than Tennessee would. So
who is Tennessee going to pick?
They're going to pick Quinn Ewers. Well, listen, man, if you remember one of our bold prediction shows from a while back.
Quinn Ewers number 1 overall?
Yeah, I said he would be the number 1 quarterback drafted this upcoming year. So, yeah, if I was Tennessee, I'd pick Quinn Ewers. I stand by my picks.
I think they go Cam Williams from Texas.
Ooh,
number 1 overall.
Interesting.
They invest in the offensive line, but they make a really weird choice.
Oh, yeah. Texas is... Why would you invest in a Texas offensive lineman? That is a slight at Kelvin Banks.
Not a Kelvin Banks guy?
We'll see.
So, if this is updated, then, not factoring in the wild card where we were both equally bad because we had the same picks, I was 161-80 for 66.8% on the season.
That's a good number.
It's all right number.
It's not as high as mine. I was 107-85 for 68.75% on the season.
107-85?
187-85. Which amounts to 272
games. Because I didn't pick every single game. Yep.
68.8% win percentage. I picked right that amount of times. That means that that means that the Rams will win the game against the Eagles because
it's definitive.
Yeah.
Write it in.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, this one kind of has an asterisk on it because we haven't been doing it the whole season and you didn't pick every week. This is like the NFL championship before the first Super Bowl. It counts.
Great comp.
But does it really count? Like, they'll celebrate it. It's in the rafters, but nobody really cares too much about it. Next year, the Super Bowl begins.
That's actually a really ironic comparison because I'm the Packers fan.
Yeah.
Not more Super Bowl championships, more NFL championships.
Yeah.
More professional football league championships than anyone else, I believe.
Yeah, and then you're also going to win the first Super Bowl. That means that you're going to win next year, right? Because the Packers won the first Super Bowl.
And the second.
So you're going to win for the next 2 years.
Time.
I'm not going to win until, like, what, the 33rd year that we're doing this? Was that when the Broncos won? I can't remember. But they won in 19-something.
Oh, don't worry. I'll have really high expectations, and then I'll turn 2 decades of fantastic picks into only 2 Balls Talk Sports championships.
Yeah, when Patrick Mahomes Jr. goes 17-0 and I pick him to win every single time, that'll be when I finally win.
Congratulations, Victor, as
Thank
the
you very
official
much.
Balls Talk Sports ball knower.
Thank you very much. I won't let everybody down. Hopefully my take comes true this weekend. I do like Philly. I would not be upset if they win at all. I like Philly. I rooted for them for a while. So, But Los Angeles, I picked Los Angeles, but doesn't matter. I'm the ball knower. I'll get a very, very, very small prize, like first pick whenever we do a mock draft or something this season. And then the games will begin again next year, and it'll be better. So,
Fuck the Eagles. Ladies and gentlemen, stay hard.